off cell phones, and anyone with a BlackBerry, take it off the table so we don't get interference. Committee members will be accessing their laptops because the materials for the committee are on our computers, so it's not that everyone's doing email, and they're using it specifically for the committee materials. Just rules of the road. The committee welcomes public comment on any item on the agenda.
Excuse me. I can't hear, and I wonder, because I'm 70, is there any chance of speaking louder? I know there is because it's a requirement.
I'm speaking, I will speak as loud as I can.
Make staff arrangements because people of my age sometimes can't hear.
Do we have the option for microphones?
We'll see.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
I will try and project this as well as I can.
I appreciate that. It's very important for us to hear every word today.
Okay. The committee welcomes public comment on any item on the agenda, and we will ask for public comment prior to the committee taking action on any item on the agenda. If I forget to ask for public comment, I hope one of my colleagues will remind me to do so. If for some reason and you wish to speak on the item, please raise your hand and you'll be recognized. There are speaker slips in the back of the room for anyone who would like to speak. And if you could please fill out a slip and hand it to Mr. Einer. Tim, would you raise your hand?
As a point of order, under the Brown Act or the, I think they're also under the separate Keene Act, Officer Keene Act, it is not required that anyone who wishes to speak sign in. In fact, they may be anonymous. So I'm sure anyone here that felt like they wanted to talk without signing in would be well within the law. The intimidation of signing in is part of the problem. So I'm sure what you're going to say, Dr. Levine, is that anyone that wishes to speak can speak without signing in. Thank you.
It was a request.
Yes, the request
We don't need to have a
clarify the
conversation.
law for all those in the room is that people do not have to sign in ever to any meeting in California. It came with the Brown Act, not Governor Brown, but the scandal of having closed government in the past. Thank you.
Thank you for your remarks.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Okay.
Look, before we proceed, Dr. Lee, let me just be clear. The gentleman is correct. The gentleman is correct. We do that, though, for the purpose of ensuring a full record, not for any intimidation or any other purpose, just so that we can accurately reflect the testimony or the comments given at the meeting. There is no attempt at intimidation or shutting off or chilling public participation. It's merely a clarifying effort.
This is used across.
So can I have a point of order now, sir? Because I've taken an early morning flight to be here. This is not an opportunity to have a conversation. You're going to be entitled to have your fair share say, but I don't think it's fair for us to hold on the, we've got a time limit here, we've got to move on the agenda.
And there is, when speakers speak, there's a 3-minute time limit, so that we can get through our agenda. Yes?
Under the very acts that we've talked about, there is no 3-minute limit. This is used as a secondary intimidation. What the actual law says, and this does not count to my 3 minutes. I signed in as Roger Williams, but I actually am someone else. I'll tell you who. Somewhat federally connected. And I would like to say that 3 minutes is one of the ways of intimidation that's used to keep people like these seniors from speaking. There is no 3-minute rule. What the rule is, it depends on how many people are signing up to speak. 2 people have signed up to speak, and the board has 30 minutes for open speech. My 6-year-old would say 30 minutes divided by 2 is 15 minutes. The intimidation step is in 3 minutes you can't say much. Lincoln did it with the Gettysburg Address quite well, and most of us are not so talented. So there is no 3-minute limit. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to call the meeting to order and ask Mr. Einer to please call the roll.
Dr. Love?
Here.
Dr. Salmonson?
Here.
Ms. Yaroslavsky?
Present.
Dr. Levine?
Here. All right, and I just want to let the committee and members of the public know that we have two new board members who've been appointed, Mr. David Serrano Sewell and Ms. Denise Hines, who will be with us at our October board meeting. And we have Dr. Michael Bishop, board member, with us today in the audience also. Speaker slips.
There are two speakers that, may I get before you to save time?
No, we're not taking public comment.
Oh, you're on staff, I forgot.
Okay, and I have two speaker slips for items, for public comment on items not on the agenda. Okay, items not on the agenda, and I will call on those speakers now. Mr. Frank Cuny.
He has 15 minutes, Greg.
Sir, I'll ask you to not interrupt.
It's a point of order in any need to have the conditions of the speech clarified. Do you have an attorney present?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
We're
two
the
of them.
attorneys for the
You
board.
have not agreed that the open meeting allows in public law up to 10 or to 15 minutes.
The board has the discretion to determine how the meeting will be run orderly.
Good. You're
And
not
depending, sir, on the agenda items, the board can set limits.
Read the law carefully.
Mr. Cuny.
Good morning. Unfortunately, I traveled too early to pick up peaches. I appreciate your executive director saying this would be a good opportunity for me to present the information to the executive committee. I am here on behalf of all kinds of people. One set of them are those people who travel outside of the state of California. We have about over 2,000 people who travel to Mexico each year for cancer treatments. We have people that go to cancer treatments of America. I don't know how many. We have people that go to Nevada and Arizona, since alternative treatment of cancer is legal in those states. We have people who go to New York and Georgia because those treatment modalities are legal in those states, but they're not legal in California. Under our health and safety code, it becomes a criminal offense for a physician to do ugly chemotherapy, radiation, and surgery. And that law was passed a good number of years ago, and we've had bills presented at various times to the legislature to change that law. The last one was by Senator Figueroa, who had hoped it would pass. It passed the Senate, but it was killed in the Assembly Committee, Health Committee, unfortunately. And I guess it's about the fourth or fifth time we've tried to deal with this particular subject. And we hope that it will pass, be introduced and passed. We have an Assemblyman, Hueso, who has agreed to sponsor the bill. We have the bill drafted and has gone through Legislative Council, and it would do several things, and I have copies of the bill here for you, and I have it in package material that we'll give you. It will have an invitation letter from me to ask you to consider to become sponsors or co-sponsors of the Cancer Freedom of Choice Bill. And then there's a 70-page report on the findings of the vitamin study used by the physicians at the San Diego hearing to oppose the proposed cancer bill. Otherwise, Assemblyman Hueso held a hearing in San Diego, and two physicians showed, one representing the Medical Association and one representing the physicians who do treatment of cancer, and both of them objected to the bill, and they listed the reason for it was a vitamin study that they had, and this particular report is a outline of how that vitamin study they had listed was a falsified study. It was not a true study. And then the third section is information on the proposed bill, just an outline of what would be accomplished by it. Then we have a fourth one, it's a 2-page article published in the Natural News, and the author is Leonard Saputo, MD. who is a member of our board. He's a publisher, he's a physician, and he also has a radio talk show in San Francisco, a very prominent physician. And before you leave, we have some books that he's published on the future of medicine that we'd be happy to give to board members that would be interested. It's a fascinating book. And then there's an article from the Chicago Tribune, The Sad Truth About the Stark Rise in Childhood Cancer. And then there's a one-page on Dr. James Forsythe, who's an MD, HMD, certified board oncologist, published by the Foundation and Advancement of Cancer Research. It's a one-page article about how he became interested in becoming a homeopathic physician and the training he had, and is one of the most prominent treatment persons in the state of Nevada that leads to alternative treatment. There's an article in the Townsend Letter on holistic approach to cancer. It's a one-page. I took the other page of that, just put that one page there. There's a 9-page article on integration oncology for clinicians and cancer patients. It's written by Dr. Michael Shatner from New York, a very prominent speaker in the area, and it's documented very well. And then 3 pages on an article from the on the Alliance for Natural Health Freedom about the state medical board. Problems have been existing from the Federation of State Medical Board, and copies of the bill. And I
Thank you
hope
very
that you
much.
take the time to read them.
And if you could give them to Jennifer Simone, materials, and we will take a look at it in the future.
And I will quickly point out, if you don't mind, there is a lot of information on smoking cancer, killing cancer, also articles in newspapers and publications.
Thank you.
It's very extensive on that.
Okay, and we have one more slip, RW. And we do have 3 minutes.
I'd like to, because I don't know if you're picking up audio back there, but can you hear that I was just told by Dr. Sharon Levine that I have 3 minutes? I hope you picked that up. She's not, you're agreeing to that, what you just said.
That's correct.
That's correct, because that is, I know you're timing me, so people normally time me, so someone should be on the clock at 3 minutes. You're violating the law, but it's okay to do this, because I've tried to make this short. Yeah. This medical board of California is the most corrupt gang in the United States. They represent fraudulent medical care across the state, and sign is actually not one of the options. The Continental Congress said that if you sigh during a speech, you are actually inflicting damage on the speaker. It was illegal in the Continental Congress to read newspapers, which some of you are doing, or otherwise not pay attention. But in fact, you have rules.
Excuse me, sir.
I can say any direction I wish.
Address the board.
I don't have to. That's in the law. And my legal counselors over here will understand that there's no requirement in the law that I address anyone else. The people of California lend you power under the Brown Act. It's the most perfect piece of legislation in the state of California. I'm using up my 3 minutes.
Okay, I'm going to tell you, I feel personally uncomfortable having you stand like this, so it's my prerogative to let you know that. It's my prerogative to let my staff know that, but I personally feel threatened by having you stand like this, so I would ask you to have a seat at the table, or you remain behind the table, sir.
I will remain behind the table line. I'm used to teaching large groups in the hundreds. I will now tell you my name. My name is Dr. Charles Phillips, the author of Paramedic Skills Manual. I've helped Congress twice with issues in getting Lemaitre out of California. I've actually had a lot to do with Kaiser doing their renal tests a little better. I'm asking that I now go over the credentials of Dr. Levine because her credentialing is false. She has under conflict of interest. This is all legal to say. This is considered the public has a right to
I'm just
say.
more worried we're having an earthquake.
You're using my 3 minutes. I will ask now that any time that they object to my speaking, that not be taken out of my 3 minutes. And I've spoken for 40 years and know the law. Legal counsel, may I have back any time that Barbara Yarrels, that Barbara is, sorry, I apologize, Barbara Y is using out of my 3 minutes. May I have that back? You
Yes.
know the law.
I'm familiar with the law, sir.
Yes. May I have that back?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I know the law too. I've spoken before hundreds and hundreds of areas, and the problem is that Dr. Levine can no longer share this topic, because what I'm going into now is her corruption in conflict of interest papers. And the law says that ever since the Continental Congress, the moment that you are the topic, you can't chair. That was General Washington. They all did this. They said basically it's obviously conflict of interest to chair a topic in which you are the subject. Because I'm now moving to Dr. Levine's credentials. My purpose, because I might get cut off, is that this whole board should be down in Fresno in the next meeting under the Superior Court judge running the meeting, federal court. This is a federal violation because Dr. Levine has also misstated her credentials in terms of her federal role in Obamacare in the executive committee that oversees all of you, not just state-wise, but nationally. I know I'll be cut off, but I'm asking the federal judge to do this. And now I will start into Dr. Levine. I apologize. I'm Dr. Phillips. I signed in Dr. Williams because he's my 6th generation origin. And he's the one that gave freedom of religion and took Rhode Island. You know the story. Basically, how am I going on time? I get to know my time as I speak.
You have 1 minute left.
1 minute is perfect. I've tried to time this as I've worked on the timing. Basically, here's the problem. Dr. Sharon Levine is the wife of Dr. Francis J. Crossan, who may be here in the room. I was asking someone's name over here, and I don't know if it doesn't matter. It's not his right to say. That is a huge power couple because Dr. Crossan has been the head of the largest group in the United States of doctors and setting policy, in fact, taking over Kaiser. If you go to the actual book of his interview, he ran Kaiser by the secret meeting of 6. Approximately 2 weeks before every meeting, he essentially set the agenda for as a co-chair of the Permanent Medical Partnership Group. You can't have partnership between nonprofit and profit. I've spent 60 hours with the IRS in the Keaton case such that every one of your phones are probably tapped. So as you try to go after Dr. Charles Phillips, you will find that your phones may be tapped. So shred nothing.
Your time is up, sir.
15 seconds.
I have 15 seconds because he's giving me back the time that Mark Hawaii used. In that 15 seconds, I'm telling you now that I've already filed in Washington, D.C. all of this information. It's in key toms. The IRS is onto it. The HHS is onto it. SEC is onto it. And I appreciate this time to speak before the illegal idea that you're still chairing this meeting, which is what the Board of Pharmacy did on pill splitting. They had a Kaiser representative chair pill splitting.
Sir, your time has elapsed. Your time has
There
elapsed.
is absolutely nothing in the law that says there's 3 minutes. I did not, I'll go back, I'm threatening to you. There's nothing in the law that says there's 3 minutes. What is occurring here is the illegal act of trying to silence people. The only way to get me to stop speaking, in fact, is to call the Capitol Police. And I have no problem with that.
You have to stop.
No, you can't usher me out.
Yes, we can.
You cannot, because I know my record.
Yeah.
Disruptive is not,
meeting.
I know that, I wrote the chapter on disruptive.
Please take a seat.
No, not yet. Time is up. Huh? What's your name? I need to know who you are just for the camera.
I'm Andrew Hickle.
I didn't get it spelled, but Andrew,
Hickle.
I can't spell that. I'm gonna
We'll
sit
be
down.
happy to tell you
No,
outside.
no,
We'll
you're all
discuss
anonymous.
outside.
I need to know how to spell your name. I'll sit down.
You need to take a seat.
Oh, I heard that. No, I didn't see it. Then I spell it for the camera. The person who is now enforcing the Medical Board of California's executive committee against the issues of fraud to the billion-dollar level is Andrew Hickling, badge 254. And he's a supervisor investigator too. Are you with which agency?
I'm with the medical board.
What is, are you a police agency?
Yeah, come on, let's
Well, you have a badge.
Please.
You have a badge. I'm not going outside, I'm sitting down.
Please take a
This
seat.
is not, I'm finishing. I'm going to sit in the chair of my choice.
Well,
and
whichever.
listen
Sit.
Let's have a seat.
I'm going to go
Let's
sit.
get
And
rid of
if,
that.
And if you'd like to
meeting
go
is in
outside-
order, because I'm in the legal side, and every attorney that would look at this would understand there is absolutely no freedom of law. I've tested this 15 times. They all know it's not true. I'm slowly on my own, because people in the Bible might walk toward whatever they choose, sitting in a chair. Now
Is
did
the
you unplug that?
amplification working?
Are you unplugging
No.
something electronic here? Huh?
Okay, can you hear
Very
me now?
good, because we,
Okay, great. Are there any other speakers who wish to speak to items not on the agenda? Okay, if not, we're going to move on to approval of the minutes from the July 18th, 2012 Executive Committee meeting.
So moved.
There, we do have a question. Legal counsel has a question on page 4. Looking at the second paragraph, the second to the last sentence of the second paragraph says, and I quote, "Keeping physicians who are under stress and unhealthy is another way to make sure that there are enough physicians to go around to serve all areas." And I'm not quite sure that sentence makes sense, so we're helping, perhaps?
Yeah. Yes, you're absolutely right. The intent was that maintaining the health of physicians who may be under stress, and I think I've already submitted edits to Ms. Whitney on that. Thank you for that.
So the maker of the motion will accept any changes and additions as
Thank you.
stated.
Thank you.
And the second also does it, Dr. Ralph?
Any other changes, edits, corrections? Is there any public comment on the minutes? Okay, seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, minutes are approved as amended.
I think the gentleman has a question. Sir, do you have a question?
oh yes, thank you. I have a question as to why you use the double snake sign, which is the sign of pharmacy and not the medical sign or single snake over your minutes. So as you
This is time for comment on the minutes.
Well, just covered the minutes, and on my way to the minutes, I got confused by the double
So you're
snake.
still out of order.
Okay, I want to announce committee assignments, committee appointments that have been made. The chairs of the licensing and enforcement committees, Dr. Salmonson and Dr. Lowe, and we will be electing a vice chair and secretary at our next board meeting. To the special faculty permit committee, Ms. Yaroslavsky as the public member who will be replacing Ms. Hetty Chang, who's no longer on the board, and the committee did meet on September 6th. To the Health Professions Education Foundation, Dr. Sylvia Diego will be the second member, replacing Dr. Shelton Durso. The foundation had its last meeting on August 23rd. Sunset, this is 2013, is the year for the medical board sunset review. And at the request of staff, we have appointed sunset review subcommittees. Drs. Lowe and Gamanadev will be reviewing the material for enforcement, Dr. Salmonson and Bishop for licensing, and Ms. Yaroslavsky and myself for the overall content and formatting of the material review. As I mentioned before, we have 2 new board members, and I look forward to appointing them to committees after our October board meeting, where they've had a chance to get a sense of the board and visit the committee, to visit the committees. Any questions from the members?
No.
Any public comment?
Yes, sir.
Yes. In your enforcement section, you get doctors in Fresno area, the dirty area that's coming down from San Francisco air, but you don't allow physicians to appeal in the Fresno area. And so I'm asking 2 things. One is, how many of these new people are Kaiser related? And secondly, would the board be interested in the future, I know you can't go to that, and actually letting Fresno be as important as the other cities?
Excuse me.
Oh, excuse me. Your name is Diane.
My name is Diane Dobbs. I'm counsel for the board.
Good.
Your comments need to be limited to the agenda item being discussed.
I thought it had to do with enforcement.
No,
Oh, I'm sorry. So,
we'll be moving on to enforcement later in the agenda.
But I presaid my comment on enforcement, so I won't stand up front and say thank you.
So moving on to item 5 on the agenda, Ms. Zitterman from the Board of Pharmacy, welcome. And you're going to provide us with an update on the emergency contraceptive protocol.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to come today.
Under California law, a pharmacist can provide emergency contraception pursuant to a protocol, and that protocol needs to be developed and approved by the Medical Board of California. So the board initiated the rulemaking process earlier this year, and through public comment has made changes to address the public comments that have been made. In addition, during the most recent medical board, the medical board voted to pursue some additional changes to the regulation language. Contained within your packet is the language that will be brought to the Board of Pharmacy during its October board meeting for review and possible adoption. We're here today to confirm that the proposed amendments contained in the packet are consistent with the request and the action taken at the previous medical board.
And it's page 9.1 and page 9.2. Sorry, right. The protocol is on 9.1 and the changes are on 9.2.
Just a point of clarification, Ms. Sutherland, if I may. These are actually the Board of Pharmacy's regulations, you are essentially going through the rulemaking process, correct?
Correct.
I believe your statute does require that you sort of get the concurrence of the medical board in this development, is that correct?
Yes, we require medical board approval.
Okay. So that's why this is before us today. These aren't medical board regulations. These are Board of Pharmacy regulations that pharmacy is seeking concurrence. And I think there was a little bit of confusion at the last meeting, at the actual medical board meeting, about whose regulations they also were. Just wanted to clarify that. These are actually pharmacy's regulations.
Correct, thank you.
And to clarify for committee members, these are not for board approval. These are for agreement that the Board of Pharmacy has made the changes requested by the medical board.
Correct.
And they have to be correct?
Yes, we believe.
Okay, any questions from board members about the text? Okay, any public comment from the public on this agenda item on the emergency contraception protocol? Yes, sir.
No, I'll say that.
Okay. Seeing none, let's move on to agenda item 7. Legislative summary and report. Oh, sorry, 6. Mr. Warden, thank you, Kurt.
I'm sorry, Madam President, can we go back just a second? So there was no public comment. I don't believe there was no comment from the board. So is it the will of the executive committee that in fact that they wish to notify the Board of Pharmacy that in fact the amendments that were proposed in here are in fact those amendments agreed to at the meeting?
Just what you said.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry.
That's all right, keep me honest. Okay, Mr. Warden, thank you. And this is an update on the healthcare program.
Correct. If you turn to agenda item 6 of your packet on page 10, this is the information we'll provide. The regulations for the out-of-state physicians and surgeons who volunteer to provide medical services at the sponsored free healthcare events became effective August 20th of 2012. The medical board is the first healthcare board to complete the regulations for the sponsored free healthcare events. And the board has put this information on its website and made announcements and created a new web page for that information regarding, which is a copy of it, as was on page 10 and 11 of your packet. Today we have not received any applications for physicians at this time that want to participate in that. However, we are ready to process those applications. That concludes my update.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Warden from members of the committee? Any comments from the public on this agenda item? Hearing none, why don't we move on to agenda item 7, Ms. Simoes, legislative update.
Good morning. Tim is passing out some updated lists. And just to go quickly through the status of the 2012 bills, the bills in green have been signed into law by the governor. The bills in yellow have been enrolled, so they're still waiting to see if the governor's going to take action. He has until September 30th to take action on those bills. And the bills in blue have died, which means they did not make it to the legislature. Some important ones to note are SB 924, the PT Direct Access Bill, that did not make it to the legislature. SB 122, the bill related to the medical schools with the language the board approved got put into that bill and it actually went to the governor and it hasn't been signed or vetoed yet, so we're still waiting on that one. SB 1483, the physician health program bill, it did not make it through the legislature. So those are some of the important ones we are watching. SB 1236, which include the physician assistant committee bill and our VEP, 1 year extension, that did get signed. Is there any other bills that board members have questions on this list?
Questions from the committee members?
That PA bill was to change it to a board.
Correct.
Thank you.
All right, any questions from members of the public on the legislative report?
Do they have any information on why 1483 did not get through?
I don't have any insider information other than there was an article that came out right before it got moved into an active status. So there was a press article that came out and then it got pulled.
Yes, sir.
Just because I'm 70 and I don't follow some of this, you did talk about PAs in this?
There was a physician assistant committee sunset bill that went through the process that changed it to a physician assistant board, and that bill got signed by the governor into law.
Is the idea of having a physician assistant have their own board?
So right now it's a committee under the medical board, so this would make it a separate board, a physician assistant board.
Then I have a comment to that. If I may.
But part of that, but before you make that comment, still some things would go through the board, like scope, regulations, and things like that.
Well, as I may not always be up here, I had to pay for my transportation today. I wish to make a comment today.
Okay.
Physician assistants and nurse practitioners are trained for rural medicine. Therefore, they have no necessary business doing anything else. Kaiser knows that because physician assistants do not work in their emergency rooms. No one else seems to know what they're supposed to do. And the intent of physician assistants originally was to take medics and make them into physician assistants, nurse practitioners. Dr. Lawrence of Kaiser was one that got his fame by doing this. So the point is, if you're timing me, I can tell a little body language. The point of it is this: don't let them have a separate board. They're an extension of physicians. It's not to be mean, but I've seen people killed. And I just don't think having their own board when they're trained for rural extension by every training course, there isn't any hospital skill taught to physician assistants. Nurses get away with it because they're nurses first. So my suggestion to the board, as a member of the public having the power over the board, that we vote the board each month, is don't have a separate board. I hope I was clear about that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Let's move on to agenda item 8, administrative update. Thank you, Ms. Bergmeyer.
Good morning. I would like to draw the members' attention to tab 8, page 13 of your packet. As you will see, this is the most recent fund condition of the medical board. At the end of last fiscal year, the board's fund condition was at 6.7 months. This year it is at 5.2. The board reverted about $4 million this past fiscal year, mainly due to the inability to hire positions, particularly our investigator positions, which led to high vacancy rates, as well as inability to travel and purchase vehicles. In looking at the fund condition, the board will be extremely close to its mandate to 2 to 4 months in fiscal year 12-13 at the end, and within it in fiscal year 13-14. In an effort to be transparent, we wanted to let the board know of other monies that the board receives that you will not see in the board's fund condition or in its budget when we talk about it at our full board meetings. The board is a pass-through for funds received for both the Stephen M. Thompson Loan Repayment Program and the Song Brown Family Physician Training Program. Both of these funds are to further access to care. If you turn to pages 14 and 15, you will see how much the board transferred to the Health Professions Education Fund and to the Office of Statewide Health and Planning Development in the past 2 years. And just for your information, the Song Brown is a voluntary fee, and so any individual that wants to submit money, they can send it to the board and then we pass that through. And the loan repayment is, as you know, the $25 mandatory fee for initial licensees and then also for those that renew. Are there any questions on those two funds? You can see there how much was provided to each of those entities. Okay.
So,
yes.
My apologies. So looking at the fund,
I can't quite hear it, sorry. It's required that I hear.
I haven't said anything yet, but I will speak louder, okay? I'm
You
just
will
trying to
speak louder
find.
because it's required.
I'm
You
trying.
stop the meeting if we can't hear.
The question I have, Ms. Kirchmeier, is this is done monthly, the transfer funds?
Yes.
So is there a total for the end of the year?
Yes, if you look at the very bottom line, I don't know which one you're looking at, Ms. Yaroslavsky, but at the bottom line, that gives the fiscal year to date for each month. And so you'll see like in fiscal year, I'm looking at the sonogram on page 15, that at the end of the fiscal year, $64,131 was transferred for the whole year. $75,935 if you're looking at HPEF.
Yeah, that's what I was,
Okay,
I
all right.
didn't see that.
Okay, you're welcome.
Any other questions?
Excuse me, there's a step where you say questions from the public.
On
I'm actually not done yet.
on the administrative update in total.
I'm sorry, I apologize.
Page 16 shows the board's asset forfeiture account. This money is obtained when the board works with another federal or local agency in an investigation. Then during the investigation, assets are seized, and then based upon the relationship of the assets to the crime, they can be forfeited under federal statute. The board then asks for an equitable share of the assets based upon our share of the investigation. This money can then be used for weapons and protective gear, travel and training, or electronic surveillance equipment. There are specific rules that need to be followed for these purchases, and the purchases must be in the categories that I just identified and must be used for our investigators. Okay, moving on then, if there are no further questions on Breeze. I just wanted to bring to the committee's attention that the Breeze project has been delayed. There were several factors leading to the delay. At this time, the vendor is developing a new implementation plan which will include a new anticipated go-live date. At this time, the date is not anticipated to be before the middle of December, and we continue to be very involved in the project, and we'll provide you hopefully in October a date that we expect to go live on that project. In regards to personnel, we currently have 21 vacancies of our 271.1 positions, which is an 8% vacancy rate. However, we have several individuals in background for actually those 21 positions. As stated at the July meeting, due to side letter agreements with the state's bargaining units, we lost all of our student assistants and 11 non-mission critical retired annuitants effective September 1st. Because of this loss, several of the board's functions are moving slower, including opening and delivering mail and updating the applicant lookup. Unfortunately, because we didn't have the authority to fill behind these positions right away, we do not have anyone in right now performing those duties. However, we are trying to hire seasonal and permanent intermittent staff for the duties. We did submit requests to keep all 31 of our retired annuitants as we felt their duties were mission critical. However, after review of the State and Consumer Services Agency, we were only allowed to keep 20 of the retired annuitants. And of those, only 6 are allowed to continue through the fiscal year, and only 2 can continue beyond that date. The board is working, though, on succession planning and knowledge transfer with our current retired annuitants so that the information they possess is actually transferred on to the staff to continue that knowledge base. And then I would actually like to draw your attention to page 17 of your board packet. At the July board meeting, the executive director provided the members with suggested meeting dates. Please see page 17 for those dates. Due to the need to locate and enter into a contract with a hotel, we need to have the executive committee make a decision on the first board meeting of next year. The suggested date is January 31st and February 1st, so I would actually like to ask for a motion to approve this date with the location in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Any questions? Is there a second?
Comment?
You're Dr. Lowe.
Yeah. Okay. Any further discussion among the board members? Okay. Any public comment?
Yes, I don't think that this was on the agenda to vote. If it is here, I'm just old. But I don't think it's here in the packet that you can vote on this today. and I have a comment about it that it makes it important because I certainly can't do it. But secondly, just an opinion, I think public comment, I see all the body language that they didn't use in the Continental Congress, but that's fine. I don't think they can vote. But secondly, Fresno's never here. For those of us in Fresno, bigger than Oakland, the shame of it is the medical board doesn't like us. The air is too thick, where too many people have asthma. So my suggestion to the medical board is I would kindly engage each of you with your eye contact. I hope you're not doing scramble. It's your right to do what you wish. By eye contact with your legal staff, I would ask that, excuse me, let me get the geography right for threatening. I would ask of your legal staff that you might consider that Fresno, called the center of the valley, where we grow all of your food, just about. I know you do rice, I eat second rice, but just in general, go to Fresno and be part of California. Now, when we get high-speed rail, we'll be the most popular area. Comment limited to probably 2 minutes, and I did it. Please,
Thank you very much.
You can't agree to this agenda. It's not an agenda.
It's actually on the agenda. If you
It
look
is.
at
A vote
number
is on there?
8D, it says 2003 meeting dates and locations, and up here it says action may be taken on any of these
Oh,
items.
no, but I had fun. Please come to
Okay,
Fresno.
thank you.
Be happy to take care of it.
All in favor of the motion to direct staff to move to secure meeting space in San Francisco Bay Area for the January 31st, February 1st meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you, the motion carries.
Thank you.
so
For the
much.
rest of the meeting dates, the full board will take action at its October meeting, so please just review your calendars in consideration of those meeting dates.
All right, thanks so much. Mr. Einer, could you come forward, please, and join Ms. Kirkmeyer, and continue on to item 9, strategic plan update.
Excuse me. Could each person introduce themselves to the title as they step in? That's his knowledge.
Kimberly Kirkmeyer, Deputy Director for the Board.
Thank you. I didn't know that. Thank you.
And I'm Tim Einer, Administrative Assistant for the board.
Just for the video, could you, at some point, sure.
Go ahead.
This is live feed, correct?
Go ahead, please.
As part of Mr. Einer's duties, he will be taking over the updating of the board's strategic plan. He will also be presenting the updates to the committee starting today, so I'd like to turn over the presentation on this agenda item to him.
Thank you.
If you could turn to tab 9, it's page 19 in your book. You'll find the update on the board's strategic plan objectives. And per discussion with the board president, it was decided that the strategic plan should be presented and reviewed at each of the executive committee meetings. The objectives on pages 19 to 48 have been updated to indicate the activities that have been completed and with dates that have passed or are due at this time. Please be aware that the objectives that did not have current or past due dates have not been included in this update. They will be included in the update when they are due. At the July committee meetings, the program chief reported that several items on the agendas were in follow-up to objectives to the strategic plan. The chief of licensing and the chief of enforcement will continue to indicate where the items they are discussing tie to the objectives of the strategic plan, so the members know the items are being completed. I would like to ask if anybody has any questions before we start.
Any questions from members of the committee?
I'd like to go ahead and start then on the action of objective 1.5, page 24. The updated international school review process will not be completed by the summer of 2012 due to the lack of staff in the licensing unit. The new date of completion has been moved to the summer of 2013.
Okay, just slow down a second. So which item are you on?
That's objective 1.5, page 24, and it's the last objective item.
Okay, so I've got 2 different pages, or 2 different sets of information, so 1 second.
Okay. Do you have a question, Mr.
No.
Okay, please proceed.
Okay. And so on objective 2.1 and 2.2, those are pages 25 through 26. These objectives are somewhat delayed due to the fact that the board is unable to hire a legal counsel retired in New Intent to assist in review of the current laws and regulations. A new timeline will be developed and presented in spring 2013.
And I assume some of this will be covered in the sunset reviews. Okay. Go ahead.
On the objective 2.3, page 28, these objectives will need to be completed for the sunset review hearing in spring 2013. So therefore, the due date should be changed to spring 2013 as well. And then on objective 2.7, on page 31, due to staffing vacancies and sunset review, we have deferred examining disciplinary decisions, but will begin this project in the spring of 2013. And then objective 2.10 on pages 34 and 35. The first action is that being on preliminary information from this review, this item is being suggested for discussion by the executive committee as a possible item for the sunset report. On this item and several of the other tasks in this objective, due to sunset review, they will not be completed until the summer of 2013.
How is that going to impact sunset review?
I can't hear you, sorry.
How is that going to impact sunset review?
It will actually be written up in sunset review for that part. So we'll be looking at that kind of as we go along.
Can you use the microphone, it's right there.
I have no more comments.
On objective 3.9, page 36.9, a list of media opportunities is being compiled and is expected to be completed in the winter of 2013. Recently, the executive director provided a presentation to the National Hispanic Medical Association. And continuing on 36.10, at the January 2013 board meeting, a plan to address other groups and expand the board's communication efforts will be presented. And then moving on to objective 4.4 on page 39, due to the sunset review, this will not be completed until the spring of 2013.
Okay.
Page 39.
Is there a reason that that's being delayed?
It's actually all part of the communication plan that came out of the education committee at the last one. It will be worked on, it's just that it's not going to be one of the top priorities. It's kind of like we had to prioritize all of the actions, and this is one. It's not, when we say that it won't be done until that date, we'll be working on these items, but as far as its completion, it's not going to be done until the spring of 2013. And it's just really due to prioritization.
And staffing, I assume you mean
It's-
staffing
yeah,
resources
staffing.
in terms of completing sunset
Absolutely.
review.
So that kind of answers the next item that we were going to talk about.
Right.
Is that
Point of order. It would appear the board can talk about each item but not the public.
That's correct. That's
Public
correct.
cannot.
The public can comment at the end of the items.
Just so I understand the law. Thank you.
So all the other objectives are on target for completion or have been completed as indicated in the status column. We would like to point out that the board, having to eliminate student assistants and the non-mission critical retired annuitants, that this could have a negative impact on several of the objectives since we have planned on having the retired annuitants perform the research for the objectives. Additionally, with the loss of these individuals, staff may not have time to assist in the completion of these objectives due to their current workload. We will continue to monitor the issue and let you know its impact at future meetings.
Do you have a sense of, or an approximation of the number of net FTEs that these personnel changes will leave you with? I mean, the net loss.
So the net loss, we lost, I want to say we lost 6 current student assistants. Is that correct, Mr. Warden?
Yeah.
And then we lost 11 retired annuitants so far. As Oh, and IS2, that's right. We lost 2 in our ISB unit as well, student assistants. We've lost 11 retired annuitants as of September 1st. As of July, we had actually lost 19. We lost 11 retired annuitants up on September 1st. But going forward throughout the year, we're going to lose 18 more of those through to the end of fiscal year 12-13.
And as a percentage of your available staff, is that?
They probably, with the individuals, I would say they were working about part-time. I'm looking at Miss Whitney to get confirmation on that. That's what I would, based on the hours that they have provided, it's about part-time. So if you add those up, it's probably about, 10 positions of full-time that we lost.
Ms. Yaroslavsky?
So, 10 positions of full-time employees is a big dent in our population.
Absolutely.
So my question is, what is being done to promote that with the agency and department director, as to either budget change proposal or mandating? I mean, what do we need to do?
Well, what we actually have done is we do have the authority, though, to hire seasonal employees and permanent intermittent employees. We currently are in the process of hiring 10 seasonal employees. In our licensing unit, we're hiring 2 seasonal employees in our ISB. We have 11, or 9 actually, office technician, permanent intermittents that we're hiring right now. And as we go through losing the rest of our retired annuitants, we're going to be advertising for permanent intermittent positions to fill them. So we're hoping that we will be able to keep the workload with those new individuals. As I said in my report, the problem was that we were notified so late that these individuals are going to be lost that we weren't able to staff up prior to those individuals being gone on September 1st. But we're in the process of hiring right now.
So we weren't ready for September 1st. We weren't
Right.
ready for July 31st.
Right.
Are we going to be ready October 1st? What do we do? My concern
Yes.
is that we're going to get behind and we're not going to be able to play catch up.
Completely understand. We are in the process of hiring. We just received applications actually for the licensing individuals this week. So we're going to be doing interviews and hiring those individuals. But we actually are developing a plan right now to make sure that we are hiring in time, that those retired annuitants that we're losing, that they're there to train the employees as they come on board. So our hope is that as we go forward, there's going to be some loss of productivity, obviously. Right now we found that just in the opening and delivering of mail, and also in the posting of information on the applicant lookup site. But we believe that with the hiring of these individuals, we'll be able to catch up with that workload. That's our hope.
Are these full-time employees or are these part-time
No,
employees?
these are part-time employees.
Is there a reason we're not looking to make these positions permanent?
In order to make them permanent, we would have to go through the budget change proposal process. We didn't report it out at the last meeting, but the budget change or the augmentation that we had requested for positions was denied. We can look at it in the spring of 2013 and determine if we need to put budget change proposal in for more positions. But as you may know, in the budget letter that has been provided from the Department of Finance and the administration, additional positions are very hard to obtain at this point in time.
My concern is that from what I've been reading in the media, is that there has been a respect for putting people out into the workplace, that there has been an advance of those positions being allowed versus just the stagnation of hiring state employees. So are we making a good enough case that this is going to be a detriment to the employment of these individuals, which are going to cost the state in taxes?
Yes, I mean, we're making every effort to get those individuals on.
Ms. Selmanson?
Well,
Dr. Selmanson, sorry.
Our problem. 2 things. One, when you said losing the retired annuitants by their choice or choosing not to work longer?
No,
So
there was.
how is this new category acceptable, but the retired annuitants?
If I may, please, so we can reverse back to agenda item 8C regarding personnel, when that question was more appropriate in terms of the agenda. May we do that? Okay. Then moving back to agenda item 8C, which is personnel regarding the retired annuitants. We were notified in, I believe, late June that there was going to be an agreement with the bargaining units regarding student assistants and retired annuitants. We were informed clearly that the student assistants would be terminated from employment with the state of California, and that's across the board, by the end of August. We did not know what the result would be regarding the retired annuitants because we submitted 31 as mission critical. We did not hear until the end of August which ones were agreed upon as mission critical. So we were not able to fill behind those in a rapid fashion, but we are working on that. In addition, the administration notified us that we could use seasonals to replace students and permanent intermittent staff that are not permanent staff. They're intermittent who can work up to 3/4 time. They could be used to fill behind the retired annuitants. This is a new policy that has not been allowed before by the administration in most cases because that's an increase in staff. But they are now approving that for a more permanent type of employment, although it is not permanent. These individuals then might be able to progress with examinations into permanent positions in the future should there be vacancies.
Well, I guess my question is it the title of the position or is it the person? Are we losing trained people to have untrained people?
Yes, a retired annuitant is an individual that has worked for the state for some time, who is trained, and has made a decision to come back from retirement to work about half-time. It's a little bit less than half-time hours, and there's authority in the retired laws, the retirement laws from PERS that allows individuals to do that. There's a side letter with the bargaining units that have...
Excuse me, what is the bargaining unit?
Bargaining units, all of the employees have bargaining units, representation, unions that represent the employees. And so there was a side letter with SEIU that requested, or there was an agreement that the retired annuitants as well as the student assistants would be let go and that we can transition them into seasonals and permanent intermittents. What it means is that those retired individuals who knew the job will be going into full retirement, and we hope to replace with permanent intermittent new individuals who will then be trained by the retired annuitants so they can then step into those positions and do the work that the retired annuitants did. And it's part of the succession planning to make sure that we do in fact train new people to do the workload and not continue to have retired individuals doing the work.
Okay, going back to, unless
Madam President, given that kind of comprehensive and voluminous...
I can't hear you. Could you use the microphone, please? It's required. It's a requirement that I hear. I know the law. You do.
Madam President, since that was since return to item 8C, personnel, and we had quite a comprehensive and voluminous discussion of that, perhaps you want to ask if there's any public comment on the new addition to 8C.
any public comment on the addition to 8C? Hearing none.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. I'm moving my chair. I believe you're asking about comment on what's just been said.
Yes, on the personnel item.
I do raise my hand. And I wish legal counsel to say to the camera how much time I get to make a comment on this disastrous report we just heard.
Sir, I'm the legal counsel. We look to the present to apportion time, but
You have 3 minutes.
But you may have 3 minutes to speak on this item.
Oh, that's fine. I'll try and be less. What we just heard is a report that's like the Titanic is sinking. Everyone is saying, and the audience may be bored here because it looks like you are probably lobbyists, but to the cameras and to the board, this was a disastrous report. We can't open our mail. Do you know how many patients are affected by that in California? 35 million. What is it, state? 35 million, I guess. My son, age 9, does it out of the almanacs, but just within 3 minutes. This was disaster. You're not able to do this, you're not able to do that. The reason you can't do this, and I'll keep my distance, is that you avoid the valley, the highest unemployment rate, where people would line up to volunteer, like they do for the President of the United States. And in your August level, people would volunteer to open the mail. There would be lots of seasonal people that would do this. I will tell you that Fresno State, because I expect to be teaching the PhD program shortly, will offer you free room. You also have smaller parts of the medical board. You have the enforcement offices. You have lots of places. I will speak also as Emeritus St. Agnes, best hospital in town. That St. Agnes will give you free room. So what you might do, if you ever thought the Valley is still part of California, is what you might say, why don't we have 100 volunteers and 200 seasonal workers so that we can open our mail, take care of patient business, stop the pill splitting, stop the changing of charts that's going on, where your medical record is going to get changed if there's bad outcome, the pill splitting that's hurting 10 billion people, all the fraud that same volunteers might have an interest in. That should be your business. And in fact, all we're looking at, watch, this is not allowed in Continental Congress. This is standard for the medical board. This is body language. We're using ours. This is an awful representation by Mr. Kepler,
yes.
attorney at law, licensed. Your
Law.
license? I can be off point. He has a license. He's actually giving me body language. I'll have his license Googled. My 9-year-old will Google his license. You better pay attention to this. This is the...
You're out of time.
I'll be back.
You're out of time.
Anyway, lots of volunteers.
Okay.
This looks like a lobbyist group. I
Let's
hope there's
return
a civilian here.
item 9.
We're actually completed with
All right.
number 9.
Okay, any comment, questions from the board members on item 9 on the strategic plan update? Any additional questions? If not, any public comment on item 9? Yes, sir. You have 2 minutes.
Why would I get 2 minutes after 3?
Well,
Is that a legal counsel?
Sir, I take my direction, this is my client.
Oh, okay.
Board is
Client has
recording.
spoken, so you're going to go with that and defend that in court. Okay, federal court. This is illegal. This whole meeting is illegal because we're not allowing open time for the public to speak. I'm boring people. I see the yawns. I saw those lobbyist yawns. That's fine. People are out there in the videos, and you will be in the paper, and you'll be part of this. This is the most corrupt group going, and staying on topic, because that's what you would like. You want me to stay on topic? I believe we're on the topic of taking care of the business of the future plan. The future plan of the board should be...
The topic is the strategic plan update.
Right. The strategic plan should root out corruption. If you will look at the Department of Consumer Affairs, the ethics part that's above you, no, not above you physically, above you in terms of power. It's the governor, Department of Consumer Affairs. There's the ethics paragraph of the Consumer Affairs. It suggests that the business of people might be about rooting out corruption. All of you took the ethics course. Didn't you? Don't comment, because I have no right to ask you. But the camera's asking you, didn't you take the Department of Consumer Affairs ethics? Did you teach it? Don't have to comment. It's fine. You're held to it anyway. And it basically said root out corruption. This is the most corrupt state in the United States, and where we get away with it in California, it goes across the nation. Pill splitting, messing with medical records, hospitals having IPAs, which is Independent Practice Association, doctors controlling nonprofit hospitals, totally illegal. People in Kaiser, for example.
You have
Dr. Phillips, your time is up.
30 seconds.
30 seconds, fine. Dr. Levine actually has $4 million in retirement from her work at Kaiser because she's married.
Sir, I have a question. We're on the strategic plan. Yes, we're on the strategic plan.
I'm on the conflict of interest for her having a vote on the strategic plan. $4 million retirement taken from Kaiser patients. So she knows it's true because her husband has $2 million. So I know it's boring, particularly boring someone here.
Time has
with a
expired.
badge. Thank you.
Okay, could we thank you both. Thank you for your update, and let's move on to the Sunset Review Report discussion and guidance. Ms. Kirkmeyer, thank you, and introduce Ms. Robinson, Board's Research Program Specialist, who's replacing Ms. Jamie Cordray, who retired last year. Please, thank you.
Staff have been working very hard on the board's Sunset Review Report. The general sections have been sent to the 2-member review committee, and the licensing and enforcement sections should be going out to their respective members by the end of the week. So I'm looking at you too, if not before. The Sunset Report has a section entitled New Issues. This section is to be used to inform the Senate Business and Professions Committee of solutions to issues identified by the board. In the report, we need to provide a discussion of the outstanding issue and the board's recommendation for action that could be taken. Board staff have identified several issues that we need guidance from this committee in order to pursue the write-up for the Sunset Report. We will be going through these items one by one. There are some issues that have been identified in our strategic plan that we may need to go into the Sunset Review. However, we are not to the point where we could include these items yet due to the need to wait for further action. An example of that would be the maintenance of certification or licensure issue. Currently, the board is waiting on more information from the pilot program from the Federation of State Medical Boards. So I'm going to ask that, I know we're short on time now, so I'm going to start with the first issue. And again, we're looking for guidance and direction from the committee in order to prepare a full write-up. So this is the first item regarding mandatory email address for physicians. We believe that in an effort to save money and streamline processes, we require all physicians at the time of initial licensure or renewal to provide the board with an email address. Currently, the physicians have to provide an address and notify a mailing address and notify the board if it changes. We would like to do the same for email. We would like to know, should we prepare a full written write-up regarding this matter?
Can I suggest something on this point? Would that be okay?
Sure.
I just want to remind us all that in addition to what you have requested specifically, there have been many situations where this board has tried to notify physicians of impending actions, and we are not able to get them in there. It delays the time, and that this needs to be in a proactive, positive. This is very good.
And just to remind the committee members, we're not approving the issue, we're just directing staff
It's what you brought.
to proceed
We will be doing the write-up and everything.
do the work necessary to
I
add
just
this.
want to broaden the.
So Ms. Kirkmeyer, if I could, Bill Cook on legal, on the application itself.
Ken, you're in the back, I'm sorry. It is the right of everyone here to hear. You know it is, and there's a microphone there. You are breaking the law not to be heard.
Ms. Kirkmeyer, it's my understanding that the application itself contains a voluntary submission of email, but not everybody opts in, so to speak. So when the board wants to quickly and effectively communicate with persons, applicants, licensees, physicians, whoever, it can't because it doesn't have that address. Is that-
Absolutely.
Okay.
That is the rationale for
Yes.
it. Okay.
And if I may, on all of these, we will look at all of the pros and cons because we do know that some individuals may not have email addresses and things do change over time and how we get notified. So all of that would be included if the guidance from the executive committee is to move forward with looking at these issues.
And I think what I'm going to do is just have you move through them unless there's one that people want to say, no, don't do this, and then we'll give you a recommendation at the end. Is that all right?
Perfect. I love that. Okay, moving on. Postgraduate training posting on the board's website. Section 803.1 states the board shall disclose to a physician's approved postgraduate training, and then section 2027 states the board's website should contain anything in section 803.1. The board currently posts the number of years completed in postgraduate, but the name of the training is not easily obtained and may not even be available at the time of licensure, as most individuals are in postgraduate at the time of application and may go into other postgraduate training. Then we are not sure of the consumer protection of this information, and we'd like to write this one up. So we'll move on, unless there's any questions. Clarify the exemption from the corporate bar for postgraduate training in hospitals. We believe that individuals in postgraduate training are exempted, and so we just like to clarify that. SB 100 required for the board to promulgate regulations regarding physician availability. This actually came out of the Physician Supervisory Responsibilities Committee, and we'd like to expand basically what SB 100 had into other practices besides just laser and IPL. Fast track,
Good morning, members. I'm going to handle the next 10 issues pertaining to licensing.
I was asking that each person say who they are. That's within the law.
Ms. Robinson,
Yes.
could you identify yourself?
Letitia Robinson, Research Specialist for the Medical Board of California.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'm sorry to so loud. Okay, so the first issue is the Fast Track program with regard to medical education and postgraduate training. There's a nationwide physician shortage. Nearly half of the shortage is in primary care. And to help address this problem, lessen time and fiscal burden on students, there's a movement toward an accelerated 3-year medical education curriculum. At this time, it's unknown whether the number of weeks of clinical training in each core subject and the number of clinical training weeks required for graduation will differ from current law. We're just seeking guidance to prepare an analysis on the issue that may require legislative changes to benefit from these new programs.
And can I, just a question, are there proposals now within California to proceed with this? And so the absence of legislative authority is inhibiting the development of these programs.
Yes,
Is
it
that
says
correct?
4 years in our statute, so we have to.
Thank you very much.
It's very important.
It says 4 years, so we would have to look at
We
legislation.
have to look at taking medicine to 3 years.
Yes.
This is the most important topic on the agenda.
Thank you. Okay.
The next issue is the United States Medical Licensing Examination is a 3-step examination for medical licensure in the United States and is sponsored by the Federation of State Medical Boards and the National Board of Medical Examiners. The exam has 3 steps. The 3rd step is being changed. This part of the exam focuses on the knowledge and understanding of the biomedical and clinical science essential for unsupervised general practice of medicine. The new step 3 will administer 2 separate exams, each 1 day in length. We're seeking to prepare an analysis to discuss laws and regulations that may need to be amended to conform to these changes. The next issue is the physician reentry. Current law allows a physician to renew a license within 5 years of expiration. If not renewed within that 5 years, the license is canceled. Currently, there is no requirement for a physician to demonstrate clinical competency when out of practice for a significant period of time during and up to those 5 years of non-renewal. However, disciplinary guidelines, on the other hand, require clinical competency examination after 18 months of no practice. Staff is seeking to look into this issue further with regard to seeking consistency on these timeframes. Next issue, clarifying medical assistance scope. Medical assistants are unlicensed individuals who perform non-invasive routine technical support services under the supervision of licensed physicians in a medical office or clinic. Medical assistants may obtain certified status through private agencies approved by the board. Although certification status is not a state requirement, certain medical malpractice insurance carriers may require its insured to only employ certified medical assistants. The board continues to receive a high number of inquiries regarding what technical supportive services a medical assistant may or may not legally perform. Therefore, staff is looking into the issue of clarifying services that may be performed by a medical assistant.
Just a point of clarification, who monitors either scope of practice or discipline within the staff, within medical assistant community?
Medical assistants are under the jurisdiction of the physician, and they're not certified or licensed by the state. Therefore, they're not regulated.
So if a medical assistant is participatory in something that has issues, there is no oversight, there's no...
The physician.
We would look to the doctor.
Or her license.
So it's under the physician's
That's correct.
license. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Next issue. Unless physicians are certified by a specialty board as defined by law, they may, they are prohibited from using the term board certified in their advertisements. The law allows the board to determine if a specialty board has equivalent requirements to those required by American Board of Medical Specialties. However, the board does not have expertise on staff to perform this function. Staff is seeking to look into the viability of other options that may provide equivalent consumer protection. The next issue, Senate Bill 100 Price requires outpatient surgery setting accreditation agencies to send inspection reports of their accredited outpatient surgery settings to the board. That is upon initial accreditation, on reaccreditation, and when reporting findings in response to a complaint about the surgery setting. These reports are to be kept on file by the board, and that final reports are public documents. Some hospital-based outpatient surgery centers may be inspected in conjunction with the hospital's accreditation and therefore may not submit a separate inspection report to the board for the outpatient surgery center. The board is seeking to re-examine the requirements, the reporting requirements for hospital-based outpatient surgery centers. Okay, next issue. The law requires physicians to supervise midwives. However, midwives cannot obtain physician supervision because most medical malpractice insurance carriers will not insure physicians who supervise midwives. The board is seeking to examine legislative options for dealing with the midwifery supervision issue. Next issue. Several of the categories listed in the statute for the midwives annual report needs clarifying. That is, some of the midwives report that they may submit erroneous information because of their misinterpretation of some of the questions or information that they're being asked to provide in their report. The reports completed by the midwives are submitted to an outside agency, which in turn provides that information to the board with aggregate data for the board to include in its annual report. Board staff is seeking to examine other options for reporting and collecting statistical information for this annual report. Next issue, midwives. There's some confusion as to whether there's some confusion by certain laboratories as to whether licensed midwives may independently, whether they're independently eligible to open lab accounts. Midwives as licensed healing arts practitioners are independently eligible to open laboratory accounts for medical diagnostic testing within their scope of practice. The midwifery standard of care states that licensed midwives may order or administer only those prescription drugs and procedures that are consistent with the licensed midwife profession, professional training, community standards, and the provisions of the Licensed Midwife Practice Act, and shall do so only in accordance with the client's informed consent. Staff is seeking to examine and seek clarifying authority for ordering lab tests and limited dispensing of medications within midwife scope of practice.
So this is just about providing clarity as to what is currently contained within the scope of practice.
Correct.
Authority.
In the law or the standards of care for midwives. And the last issue I have is the registered dispensing optician is comprised of the registered dispensing optician business, spectacle lens and contact lens dispensers that are employed by those businesses, and non-resident contact lens sellers. The board has regulated this profession since 1939, but is the board does this profession still needs to be regulated, and is the board the appropriate agency to regulate the program? State Board of Optometry is considering regulation of the RDO program. Board staff is seeking to prepare an analysis on whether the board is the appropriate regulatory body for the registered dispensing optician program. Those are all the items that I have.
All right, then moving on to the enforcement items. 805 reporting. As most of you know, there's been a significant decline in the number of 805 reports received by not just the board, but by the National Practitioners Data Bank, and this is occurring across all states. This may be due to the fact that hospitals are finding problems earlier on and sending physicians to training prior to requiring an 805 reporting. It may also due to the fact hospitals are just not reporting. However, because the board does not have jurisdiction over the hospitals, it has no way of knowing the lack of reporting is justified. Only the California Department of Public Health has the authority to review hospital records. So we're going to look at should the board staff prepare a written report on legislative option whereby CDPH would have to provide any information it finds on reportable peer review to the board during its inspection. Section of 2225.5 of the Business and Professions Code is inconsistent in the time allowed to provide medical records. For physicians, it allows 15 days, and for hospitals, it allows 30 days. So we'd like to look at making the law consistent for those two items, and that both would be 15 days, especially for hospitals that have electronic health records. Okay? Currently, a condition of probation requires a physician to provide a copy of a decision and accusation to the chief of staff at any hospital where he or she has privileges, a copy to any facility where he or she practices medicine, and a copy to the CEO at every insurance carrier that provides malpractice insurance coverage. However, there is no requirement to notify the patients. Some boards actually require the posting of a notice stating the licensee is suspended or on probation. If the board were to require the posting of a sign or something of this nature, the board would have to have statutory authority for this requirement. So to just notify the patient, this may be done through the disciplinary guidelines. So we're looking at researching this and putting this on the Sunset Review report. Okay. The Cures computer system is outdated and does not provide real-time access to prescribers and dispensers. A system needs design where a prescriber could have immediate access to a patient's prescription history. However, more funding is needed to provide this type of computer system. Additionally, research needs to be done to determine if this computer system should be administered by the Department of Justice, where it is currently housed, or with another entity. So this is something we would like to also write up for the Sunset Review. The 10-year posting requirement for physicians' public records actions. BMP Code Section 2027 states the board can only post public documents for physicians for 10 years from the date of the action. Although the records are public indefinitely, the board cannot post them on a physician's profile. If the public did not know to call the board, they may not know that a physician was actually on probation in the past. So we'd like to know if this is the best for providing consumer protection, and we'd like to do this also in the Sunset Review report. Okay. Medical malpractice reports exempting them from upfront review. All complaints alleging quality of care must be reviewed by a medical expert with pertinent expertise prior to referral of the case to the field for investigation unless the complaint is an 805 report or a complaint against the physician on probation or subject to a pending investigation or accusation. Medical malpractice reports, called 801 complaints, oftentimes need to have records subpoenaed to obtain certified medical records. The case then has to be transferred to the field to obtain the medical records or have the patient obtain a medical release from the patient. Once these items are received, the case then has to be returned to the central complaint unit to provide the upfront expert. This can sometimes take 3 to 4 months and is a huge time delay in the complaint processing time. These cases have already been reviewed, had numerous reviews through the course of the litigation process. So staff would like to exempt these from the upfront review in 2220.08. Expert testimony, the last one. Pursuant to law, no expert testimony may be permitted by either party in an administrative matter unless certain information is exchanged in writing. Part of this information is a brief narrative statement of the general substance of the testimony. The board also has a presidential decision regarding this matter. At an enforcement committee, this matter was discussed, and there was a thought that more information than just a brief narrative would be helpful. So the board is looking to expand that requirement in law. And those are all of the issues that we have brought forward. At this time, we'd like just to move those forward, but we'd also like to know if the committee has any other issues that you believe we've actually missed, because this is really our opportunity to bring issues forward to the Sunset Review Committee.
From the committee members, any additional issues or questions?
This might not be the right venue, but just in terms of looking up physicians, I've had a couple of people ask me to help them with the website. And if they have one letter wrong in the doctor's name, they'll falsely think their doctor wasn't in fact licensed. I don't know if the search could be upgraded the way like a Google search is, and if you're one letter off, they'll say, well, do you mean so-and-so? Because I've had a couple of people actually think their doctor wasn't licensed, and we were able to ferret out that they were in fact, and in good standing.
So expanding the research or the search capability of it.
Yes.
It's definitely something we'll look into.
So what I would also recommend for me, for my part.
I can't hear.
Sorry,
Reggie, Dr. Lowe, sorry.
Well, with respect to that particular issue, you can search by city or by county, so it's a pretty broad search.
The way they fell into the trap there was just where the county line was drawn. It was in fact not in a big city. So for whatever reason, their home address wasn't their practice address, and they still couldn't find them. So I just concerned that a physician was falsely accused.
Thank you.
So what I'm going to recommend is that we all take a look in detail at this again. I want to thank you very much for the preparation, and let us get back to you within the next week or so with any comments or additions or questions that we might have, because looking at it, I know I'm going to have some additional input. We can't do that. It's in law now?
No.
So you can do that if you wish to have another meeting.
Yeah, so what's before us
So we can't do clarification, so.
What's before us is to ask staff to fully develop position papers
Then that's fine.
on each of these issues. There's no.
So this is not the final look at?
No.
Okay,
This will
then
come
that's
back.
fine, okay.
The final will come back at the October meeting, so you will have another
Fine,
chance.
sorry, my
to look at
apologies,
all
thank you.
these.
Dr. Lane, I have a few comments on some of the issues that have been covered. With respect to the email issue, I think that I support it, but I think that everybody should have the option of not having an email address. I mean, I think options are always very important. In terms of the postgraduate posting of their training for the physicians, this is going to require a tremendous amount of staff time to do it. Plus, who's going to validate that, in fact, this is really true, that they have completed that training and they do have that certification? I mean, this is going to be a very involved process. It's not going to be simple.
And so you're okay with removing it, basically?
Well, I mean, I think it'd be great to have it, but I think that,
Yeah.
you know, everything has to be validated, and we have to be sure that they, in fact, did get that training. I mean, so licensing would have a lot of work to do. Okay. In terms of the 805, as I understand it, I had asked at a previous board meeting what power we have over the hospitals that don't report 805s, and apparently we can fine them up to $100,000. So we do have some control, and we just need to let the hospitals know that, in fact, they are at risk if they don't report. So I think it's important that we let the hospitals know that even though we don't regulate them, we do have some power over their not reporting.
Anything else, Dr. Lowe?
That's all for now.
Ms. Yaroslavsky.
So to tag on to Dr. Lowe, as far as the notification of the hospitals where we have, that it seems to me that it's some kind of a joint letter, or some kind of a letter from us with the Department of Health. I wrote the initials down here, wait, my apologies. The entity currently is the California PH. Yeah, so they, along with us, a joint letter of information so that we can proactively get that information out. On the hospital-based surgery, outpatient surgery center under licensing, SB 100, we currently have posted notices of doctors licensed by the Medical Board of California. I think that also the licensing, as part of that report, should be a review of the opportunities, maybe of having that as well posted, who in fact does oversee the surgery centers, what the accreditation agency's name is, and a phone number. Then as far as the, there was one more I had a comment. So, reminder letter on the Chojang 805 reminder letter, jointly signed.
And are you proposing that that be an annual or biannual?
It's not part of sunset, so it's okay. And then on the pharmacy and the cures issue, because it seems that I just don't want to impede their opportunity. And if money is the object and the problem of the resources there, that maybe we need to have, as part of the sunset review, the opportunity review with the Department of Pharmacy, the Pharmacy Board, as well as the Medical Board administrative staff about a sharing of, I would hate to use the word fee splitting, but.
Actually, in looking at this, we would do it for all prescribers and dispensers, which would include doctors, dentists, nurse practitioners,
Oh, good,
PAs,
okay, so that everybody, I just want to make sure
They would
everybody
all
was in the
have to
loop
pay.
and that there was
Absolutely.
a discussion up front. And the 801, the malpractice notification, currently when we limited something, it was based on a $30,000 malpractice suit, a $250,000 cap of something, whatever that was. As part of this, I just want to make sure the rules are updated so that if 801 reports in fact are going to be filed, that in fact if they are above the standard, which was the threshold, that those in fact would be allowed to be posted, that the subpoena, I'm not sure why you would need that.
So just real quickly, right now, all cases have to have an upfront review. What we want is for 801 cases to not have to have that upfront review. They could actually go directly to investigation if we need to get records.
If it's
and
above the
stay there
threshold.
and yeah, we only get them if they're above the threshold.
Okay, make sure that it was above, it wasn't for
Yes, we
everything.
only get the ones that are above the 30,000 mark.
Okay, I hope that that's enough input.
I have one other
Thank you
comment
very
about
much.
reentry. The issue about license cancellation after 5 years and the 18 months requirement for clinical competency examination. Those things aren't exclusive. Somebody's license can expire because they moved to another state, but that doesn't mean they have a practice.
Right.
So I mean, there's not that much inconsistency there.
What happens right now, the inconsistency is that a physician could stop practicing whether they're in state or out of state and have their license, let's say they were expired on January 1st of 2012. Their license, that was the last time they renewed. So it's going to be good until January 1st of 2017 for the 5 years. They will be delinquent during that time, but during that time, if they don't practice, let's say 4 years in, they could come in on that 4-year, renew their license, even though they haven't been practicing for the last 4 years, not have to show anything that they have continued their competency and be licensed on that day, renew their license and practice on a patient that same day. And so we've said in enforcement cases that 18 months, if you haven't practiced for 18 months, you need to have an exam. But on our licensing for those that are renewing, we're saying you could not practice for 5 years and still be okay to practice on a patient. Does that explain it, Dr. O?
That explains it, but it's not mutually exclusive.
Right. Back to the certification and postgraduate reporting on the website, because I do feel that's helpful for consumer protection, and I think the burden should be on the physician to prove what their training was. So it's to their benefit to have it reported if they did appropriate training, so when they do their renewal, rather than just making it a self-report, then they have to say, just like they'd have to provide documentation of where they went to medical school, they should have to provide documentation of where their postgraduate training was. So it should be the burden on the applicant or the renewing physician, and I think it's still important to have it reported. It's more than just a self-report.
So if I understand it, you're saying add a line to the renewal form.
Yes, because right now it's a self-report, so I think
Right.
they should have to provide the same kind of documentation that they would have to when they are initially applying and are sharing where did they go to medical school. Burdens on because it's to the physician's benefit to have it on the website, but it's also to the consumer's benefit that it be on the website.
Okay, thank you. Thanks very much. Any other comments, addenda from committee members? Thank you both very much. And I'm going to ask for public comment. Mr. Cuny was first.
Okay.
Sir, you have 3 minutes.
I had some concern about the 5-year renewal process, that there have been times where physicians were required to take training, which is very much like what new physicians take. And if they've been practicing for 20 years and been in alternative medicine, they don't know what the new physicians are being taught. So there is a concern about the fact that may be mandatory on that process. The Second, I will point out that I agree with the midwife type of thing, but a big concern with midwifery also is the fact that in order to get Medi-Cal, patient get Medi-Cal, it must be signed off by a physician. The result is that in the rural area, and particularly in the Indian tribe or something like that, midwives really can't practice because they can't get paid for the services they have. And that's been a big concern for years on that process. I agree with the statement on the discipline process. It's good to be on the record on it so consumers know what is happening on that. But particularly after it goes through, that it has been made legal on the hearing, and not just that there has been a complaint, but after the process goes into that part. I have a little bit of concern on the expert testimony on administrative hearings, that patients are not considered to be experts, and they are often told they may not say anything, they may not go into the record. And I've had that happen to me at times, where they have to be either an attorney, but a patient testimony in that it's not expert testimony and does not have to go to the record, does not have to be into that process. And I think that is the concern that I have for consumers, that patients going into hearing will be able to be recognized and their information be available in the process. And I do agree with Dr. Lowe on the email that I do know practitioners that live in areas that are very rural and the email don't carry that far. You know, it's impossible for them to have direct email into their home. They might have it in their office, but the distance they have at times on the email is difficult in the far rural area. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Feeney. Dr. Phillips, do you have a comment?
I need a series of permissions here on the way to making my comments, and I'd like 1 minute on each of 10 topics. Therefore 10 total. I'm the only one speaking.
This is specifically on sunset
Absolutely.
review.
This is on
and you have
topics
3
just
minutes.
presented.
You have 3 minutes.
Okay, now the attorney that's nodding can give his license number. If you choose not to, you should explain why.
Sir, just so you understand, this is my client.
Yes, if you are, to the public, you are a licensed attorney in the room. The public has the right to know who you are.
They can look me up on CalBar.
They don't have to. You have a license number, and they have, just as my license, G16783, is very clear. You are a licensed court.
I'm a licensed attorney, sir.
Yes.
A licensed attorney, yes.
Okay, that's all. So we'll look up in Google already.
Sir, you have 3
My
minutes.
second permission, and you can count this out of my 3 minutes, because this is so corrupt, I can't believe it, is I'd like Commissioner to put just a chart up on the board. This gentleman will hold it there while I make my last minute comments.
Is it related to the topic at hand, sir?
Absolutely.
Of sunset review.
And you put that, just hold it up so the camera public can see it, the people that are actually running, giving their lending, you time me now. I have a right to know I'm down to 1 minute.
Did you know from Dr. Phillips when he has 1 minute left?
Yes, no, yes, please, because I'm not, just asking permission where to stand and kind of use the microphone cannot be taken out of my 3 minutes. Are we all agreed to start the clock now? That's hard to hold up. It's mainly, I don't care if the board sees it because they're not listening, but the camera should see it. Thank you. If you can sit down, I mean nearby or anywhere you want. Thank you. This gentleman has come just to be helpful. Anywhere you allow him to sit, he's non-threatening, and neither am I. I was a conscientious objector in Iraq. When the Scud missiles came, I just checked the air for sarin gas. So thank you. The topics that we just heard are worth about $1 billion to the people of California. What California does will go across the nation. So you've now affected $100 billion in budget in something we can barely follow here. Giving medical students 3 years for medical school, if I heard right, has to be the most absurd idea. Right now, we're so busy making sure they rest that the medical school is half of what it used to be. I know, they went through it a while ago. So giving them 3 years is great for Kaiser, great for the VA, great for the plans, and an absolute absurdity for patients. Because already, just to let them sleep, and I never did, you've cut medical school in half. By now cutting it by 1 year, you basically have ruined it. You ruin it in California. New York will never do this. I just spent the last month with New York rules. The federal government will not let you do this, but you may try this. The trouble is none of you here can vote. The conflict of interest in this table is so high, and I don't need this microphone, because what's happening here is everyone has a connection to the plan, and the council knows that. Council, as a member of the court, and time me when I'm down, because I know you're watching this. There's no 3-minute rule. That is absolutely wrong, but that's okay. The feds will go back over this, and I guarantee this meeting will be upside down. I don't think this group will again convene, especially if they don't want to come to Fresno. Those doubting people had better be careful that I will and have given this all to the feds. I only want a copy. May I have a copy?
1 minute.
No, that's fine. May I have a copy of the video, or is it live feed? Can I get it Googled? Can I know that?
It will be posted on the web.
When? You'll tamper with it, I
Probably
know.
in the next week or two.
Okay, if it is tampered, you will break yet another rule. Gangs, which is, the law says, and you know this, anytime you have more than 1 or 2 people doing the same thing, and no one here has challenged my right to speak publicly. In fact, the law is very crystal clear that anyone standing in the way, I'm sorry, did someone interrupt my 3 minutes?
30 seconds.
Good. Oh, thank you so much. Anyone standing in the way of a doctor trying to get their patients their full rights in a plan is against public process. This board has been against public process from the moment I stood up. Absolutely illegal. This is the final point. And I don't care if the board sees this because they're not watching, but I'll try to make it as if I'm showing it to them. Our sustainable future is on this Kaiser map.
Hi.
The board finally cannot vote because they have so much conflict of interest. Kaiser's got $100 million on this topic alone.
Thank you, Dr.
The board will vote in absolute, please speak with me. The board will vote on this in absolutely illegal federal law.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Oh,
All in
that's
favor?
okay.
Aye. Adoption of the agenda.
May we have the roll call?
Dr. Solomon?
Here.
Dr. Bishop?
Here.
Dr. Diego?
Here.
Mr. Serrano Sul?
Here.
Ms. Jaroslawski?
Present.
Looks like we now, I have been vice chair. We had, I guess, the retirement of our chair, Dr. Sheldon DeRusso. So we need to have elections, and I would like to nominate Barbara Jaroslawski to be chair, panel A.
Second. You can support that motion.
Very nice, thank you. May we have a vote? Are we procedurally able to vote for?
Yes.
Do I have a show of hands?
Excuse me,
On
as
team?
a pointer, the public can speak to this. Of course. You know the law. You know the law. The public can ask comment to this.
Okay, so.
Not okay like a favor. The law.
It's absolutely.
Thank you.
So, Madam Chair, if you would consider, before this panel takes a vote of its chair, hearing some public comment, you can keep it limited. We have
Now,
a busy
could
schedule.
you cite the part of the law, excuse me, Dr. Charles Phillips here, alias Roger Williams, okay. Could you cite the part of the law that limits me to keep it short?
Well, it's 3 minutes, so that's pretty.
Where in the law do you find 3 minutes? It's not there.
Okay.
I'll take 3 minutes, but at least, I presume that's a federal camera.
Go ahead.
So do you act
For
as
how-
our
3
attorney in
minutes. I will
this
take 3
situation?
minutes.
Do you act as our?
Mr. Heffler.
Mr.
Acts as
Heffler?
your attorney in this proceeding.
Sorry. I'm giving a new title.
Good morning, members. At this point, decorum, I think, should prevail. So what I would suggest we do is that the existing vice chair, essentially, we have a nomination and a second. Dr. Solomonson, if you wouldn't mind just asking if, in fact, nominations are closed.
Are asking the members of the panel, do I have any other nominations for chair of panel A? I don't see any other nominations.
Okay, then we'll consider that matter closed then?
Nominations are now closed.
Now, normally we would not do this because this is an internal operating procedure wholly to this panel and the board. But given the circumstances with the panel's concurrence, perhaps we could allow the gentleman 3 minutes. In the old Bagley-Keene Open Meetings Act, there is a rule that says the board can apportion time accordingly, not to have disrupted meeting and to conduct his business. So on the very narrow issue, and I mean extremely narrow issue of, in fact, the nomination for chair, perhaps this gentleman could be heard. Ms. Dobbs, would you invoke the time, please?
3 minutes, starting now.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. The person who helped us with the law is Mr. Kurt Kepler. His state bar number is 224647, as he gave it to me. I informed him that everyone's phone is probably tapped by my 3 federal key toms in Washington, D.C. Not your phones, because you're the lobbyist, some public. But presume, as the governor of Illinois had to understand, that he was tapped as he went to jail. You have acted as a gang. The trouble with your nomination, now, while you're a consumer, and I appreciate that, and I'm the senior, so I'm obviously your, but anyway, you're a consumer, which is wonderful if consumers speak for the people. Your obligation is to speak for how many people in California? We said 35 million. So by camera, we're about to have chosen a chairperson to represent 35 million people so as to make the best decisions possible for their health and safety, which means, I hope you want to do this obligation, is that you will be interested in perhaps pill study. You'll be interested in fact medical record tampering. California has a lead article that I helped write USA Today. You will be interested in doctors running nonprofit organizations, for-profit running nonprofit. And I had the sense in my earlier discussions that you are bored by all that, and your body language is still bored. That is not personal. This is something that everyone understands is how we generally, your eyes contact, I appreciate that. And I think you probably will have a resume of a wealth of experience. But you do not understand the law and have to be reminded by counsel that the law is open meeting. That means the public is loaning the power to the board. Read it, it's wonderful. And it says in that we get to speak for public, and if I'm the only one standing, then I guess I have 35 million patients, just for the moment in time. And I'm tired of having pills split to the 10 billion level. I'm tired of having medical records be totally turned around into Humpty Dumpty by risk management across the hall. How am I doing at time? I have a right to know.
40 seconds.
Tired of the whole thing. This has become the most corrupt state in the union, and as California gets away with this, everyone else follows, except New York. I had the great fun of dealing with New York cases this last month, and they're ahead of you. You have a competitor out there doing it right, and they don't like tampering, and they don't like a lot of pill splitting. Medicare doesn't like it. You allow it. You make billions by doing it. And I hope when I Google you, my 9-year-old son helps me. When we Google your name, I will find nothing but helping you. And if that's true, I just beg you. Because you're obviously already, thank you.
Okay, Madam Temporary Vice Chair, then I would suggest that you call for the question. Assuming nobody else wants to talk, let's call for the question.
I want to be sure that there are no other, to be fair, that anyone else in the audience has ample time to speak. All right, then I will call for the question. Who on the panel would choose to vote for Ms. Yaroslavsky for chair of panel A? Say aye.
Aye.
One more question. Any conflicts should be resolved first. Conflict of interest in voting. Point of order.
I do not believe that there is any palpable conflict in existing conflict. I would direct that this question may be answered.
It's not yours to judge. They must state no conflict of interest.
Okay, I'm going to move on the agenda now. Thank you, and I'm going to introduce our judge who's going to be in charge of the this morning's hearing.
Thank you. On the record, please, Madam Reporter. Good morning. I'm Ann Elizabeth Sarley, Administrative Law Judge with the Office of Administrative Hearings. We are here today. We've opened a record on a petition for reconsideration and on an order of the medical board denying the petition for reconsideration. Strike that. let me begin with identifying. Yes,
Your
sir.
Honor, if I may interrupt the interruption, just want to clarify that the number 2 says also we're going to elect the vice chair, so I believe he's elected chair.
Go ahead. We'll go off the record and we'll begin again with the record.
I apologize, Your Honor.
So in the interest of time, I would nominate Dr. Simonson to remain as vice chair of this panel. Thank you. Do I have any comments from any of the members of the panel? It's my understanding that that's enough.
I would agree with you that I've just...
Thank you. All those in favor of the nomination of Dr. Simonson, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you. I'm not taking comments, sir. Sorry.
It's not a public action of the board, Doctor. It's not a public action.
I may speak to your opinion for just a second.
I apologize. Since I'm in charge of the meeting now, you may sit down. This is a panel meeting. We have a judge here. We are on a time constraint. We have attorneys present, and we have a case we're being heard. This is not time for public comment, sir. I apologize.
All right, back on the record, please, Madam Reporter. This is in the matter of the remand on the board from the Superior Court on a preemptory writ of mandamus. It's in respect to Dr. Adtecumlo, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name. Last name Kamsun, Kamsun. Madam Reporter, when you'd like to get a copy of the caption, please let me know. OAH number 2011, start that. OAH number, please turn that off. Whatever's making a noise, please turn it off. 20100600945. Agency case number D1-2005-166974. It is September 19th, the year 2012, 10:30 a.m., the time, date, and place set for the hearing of this matter. I'm Anna Elizabeth Sarley, Administrative Law Judge with the Office of Administrative Hearings. I've been assured by the board officer that we have a quorum present. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you. And councils, will you state your appearances for the record, please?
Good morning, Your Honor, and members of the panel. E.A. Jones III, Supervising and Deputy Attorney General, on behalf of the complainant.
Thank you.
Good morning, Benjamin Fenton on behalf of respondents. Thank you.
And is it Fenton?
Yes.
And I'll note for the record that Dr. Kamsun is present.
Thank you.
All right. The way we're going to proceed has been set forth in the notice and order regarding this proceeding. Opening arguments can be made by respondent if he so desires for 15 minutes, followed by opening arguments by complainant if desired for 15 minutes. Closing arguments by respondent for 5 minutes and closing arguments by complainant for 5 minutes. In addition, if Dr. Kamsun would like to address the board, he may do so. I'll leave it up to council as to whether you wish to have Dr. Kamsun address the board, and I'll leave it up to council as to whether you'd like that to occur first, prior to the arguments. Council?
Your Honor, if I think our plan was for me to speak briefly, and then for Dr. Kamsun to speak, and then to have it pass to complainant. Is that okay?
Is that all right with you, sir, Mr. Jones?
No objection.
All right, there's also the opportunity to present written arguments. Have either of you presented written arguments?
Yes.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. And will you be introducing those in your evidentiary packet, Mr. Jones? I haven't received any.
I believe the members have.
Your Honor, respondent submitted an opening argument and a reply argument, and the complainant submitted an opposition.
And all of those have been provided to the board members?
That's correct.
Panel members? Thank you.
Yes.
All right. Then you may proceed, Mr. Fenton.
Thank you, Your Honor. As the panel, I presume, is aware, this is a case that is here on a remand, and the Superior Court, in review of the case, set aside 2 of the 4 causes for discipline, and we're here for the remaining 2. I would submit that, I hope to convey that that revocation is not an appropriate penalty for the 2 violations of probation which are before us. And I want to go through through each of them. The first one relates to failure to have an approved female chaperone present during 14 patient visits at the outset of Dr. Campson's period of probation. And as you may know, Dr. Campson was put on probation in 2006 after an 8-year period where he had surrendered his license. And the board had reinstated him, had put him on probation, and one of the requirements was that he have a female chaperone. Now, what occurred was that when Dr. Campson found a place to work, this was a volunteer position, and this is all in the record. He had not practiced for 8 years as a physician, and he functioned for the first few weeks as an assistant, as he and the medical director had indicated in the testimony, as a preceptor and a receptor. And we acknowledge that that was treating patients, and that is the violation. But I think there's significant mitigating evidence, and I want to convey that to the board. First of all, the complainant has tried to convey that there was some sort of intentional deceit by Dr. Campson, and that's not the case. What this was genuine misunderstanding, and Dr. Campson's fault, and we don't understate it, was that he didn't take the probation seriously at the outset. But what had occurred was, and the reason this violation came to light, because both these cases, both the violations, were charged during the hearing. In other words, the initial accusation did not contain these, but during the hearing, when Dr. Campson testified he conceded to these things, and the board amended. And so the way that this came to light was Dr. Campson was required to maintain chaperone logs. Every patient he saw had to be initialed by a chaperone, and over 500 pages of logs were submitted. And he had his medical director for these first 14 female patients initial the log. And the reason I bring this up is because in terms of dishonesty, this is not an act of dishonesty. If someone wanted to be dishonest, you would not have had if you knew you were violating the rules, you would not have had your director initial the log. His director is a male, and you would not have had that occur. You would have just not have done anything. I mean, this is a case where someone it was a genuine misunderstanding, and this occurred now 6 years ago. And at the time, and never was concealed by Dr. Campson. The board became aware of this because these records were all supplied to the board. And one of the terms of probation was the logs had to be presented to the board. And this was all provided to the board, so this wasn't any attempt to conceal anything. This was merely a physician who was on relatively complicated probation and made a mistake at the very outset. And I would submit that I think in many cases that probationer would likely have gotten a warning, they would have been advised that was not okay. But obviously that's not hypothetical. And the other thing I want to point out with respect to the underlying issues is there's no allegations of improper care. And I want to make that clear. Since the events that occurred in 1997, and again, we do not minimize those events, but since that time there have been no allegations of improper care whatsoever. And in this case, there's no allegations of improper care. It was purely violating technical terms of the probation. So that was one issue. In 2006, as the Superior Court judge said, Dr. Campson jumped the gun. And so for the first 14 female patients, he didn't have a chaperone. And when that came out, he has accepted responsibility. We do not dispute that that was practicing medicine, but he was acting as a receptor for his program director. And the last thing I'll say about that violation is even in those cases, he had a chaperone. So there's never a case, not one case, where we ever saw any patient male or any female patient without a chaperone. So it was an improved chaperone, we concede, and that was, that was a significant error. But I don't think that warrants a revocation. And the second violation deals with failure to always have an approved worksite monitor. And what that is there was a requirement that Dr. Campson have another physician with an unrestricted license present in the office. And
the evidence is that Dr. Kempson never practiced without another physician there in the office. And in some cases, it wasn't in his, he's a pediatrician, it wasn't a pediatrician, it was just a general internal medicine doctor. But the violation, which again, we do not dispute, was not approved. And again, Dr. Kempson, I want him to speak, acknowledges that this also was a significant, overlooking what was required. And I think the fault is not being as cautious as he should have been. But I will point out with respect to that requirement, that's since been removed from the probation guidelines. So there's no longer any probationary guidelines that you are required to have a worksite monitor. And so we know that the goal of the board is to protect the public, but it's also to rehabilitate the doctor. And I would submit there's no danger to the public. The public is not, there's no requirement to protect the public to have a revocation. As I said, the allegations, the violations that relate to the quality of care issues have not occurred since 1997. Since then, there's no allegations of improper care whatsoever. So there's no harm allowing Dr. Kempson to remain on some amount of restricted practice that will come to the public, and yet it will have significant rehabilitation to him. He's a father of 3, the sole breadwinner in his family. And I reviewed before this hearing the board's own medical disciplinary guidelines, because I think that they're thought through, and I think the board spends a lot of time drafting these guidelines. And there's one that specifically deals with violation of probation. And it says the maximum penalty, which is revocation, and this is on page 31, it says the maximum penalty should be given for repeated similar offenses or for probation violations revealing a cavalier or recalcitrant attitude. And none of those are in this case. This is not a repeated offense. No allegations related to improper conduct. And it's not an individual who was cavalier. We had testimony from probationer saying that he was diligent in complying with the terms, even though he did not do so entirely. And he was not recalcitrant. Again, he was not intentionally deceiving the board at any point. He indicated that his medical director was his chaperone for those first cases. So we would suggest and we would request that there are a lot of mechanisms to appropriately monitor Dr. Kempson, and we would request that the board not impose a revocation and perhaps consider a less punitive form of discipline that I think would function to protect the public and rehabilitate the doctor. And that being said, I know Dr. Kempson wanted to say something briefly, so go ahead.
Doctor, will you stand, raise your right hand, please? Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I swear and I affirm that everything I would say today will be the truth and nothing but the truth.
Thank you. Have a seat, please. And for the record, will you state and spell your name?
My name? My name is Dr. Kempson. First name is Adeokunbo. Last name Kamson.
Thank you. Counsel?
I am extremely very sorry. I'm extremely grateful to be given this opportunity to appear before the members of the medical board. I hereby humbly request that the board be sympathetic and merciful to me, as this would consider penalty for the violation of my probation terms and conditions. I apologize for not recognizing at the outset that being in the examination room with Dr. Diop, who is the medical director, while he was examining both male and female patients before the approval of my third-party female chaperones took place. And then I also kept a log of all those because I wanted to be really diligent and making sure I didn't miss anything. I kept a record of all these accounts, and if I had known that this would have been ruled a probation violation, I would probably have waited for all my chaperones who are already nominated to be cleared and approved by a probation monitor. To me, I was just following him, shadowing him. I didn't realize that being in the same room with him while he was the one conducting the exam would be something that would be a problem. This was right at the beginning. I came in as an unpaid physician. I was volunteering. And I sit here apologizing to the members of the medical board that I'm really sorry for this oversight. I never knew that I was really doing something wrong at that time. And neither me, my colleagues, nor even my probation monitor mentioned it at that time. It was after the end of the year. This occurred in November of 2006. It was after the end of the year, at the beginning of the new year, when it was required for me to submit all my logs, that I was looking at two sets of logs. One went before the chaperone and one after the chaperone. And I didn't know what to do with them. And I said, well, Dr. Diop, what should I do? Here, I have my chaperone after they were approved. Here was the patient when I was just following it. He said, since you were just following it, it's okay. So, but after all this, I really know that I did make a mistake when it was brought up. And as I sit here today, I'm really, really very sorry about that. I should not have been in the exam room shadowing, observing Dr. Diop and others. This will never happen again. If I'm able to continue to resume my probation, I will insist that if I'm going to be in any exam room with any female patient, with or without other licensed physicians, I will make sure an approved third-party female chaperone is present throughout the duration of the exam. As evident from what had happened since the initial period, since all my third-party chaperones have been approved, I have never been in front of any patient, female, without my third-party chaperone present. I have maintained a very diligent log. I've been very, very upright. I've been very open. And I believe that I have done everything that will be possible. If I'm permitted to continue to resume my probation, I assure the medical board that I will diligently uphold the safety and protection of all my patients and their families by providing competent medical services and advocating for their continual well-being. Public safety will not be compromised should I be given this privilege again. I hold the trust that my patients give to me dearly. I weigh heavily on my Christian faith, in particular during the past 2 years, as I dealt with this trying period of my life. While I acknowledge the mistakes I have made by not being cautious enough with ensuring I comply with all the terms and conditions, I am hopeful that the board will see that I have acted in good faith and not intentionally done anything. Please. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Jones, do you have any objection to the board members asking questions if they have any at this point before you make your argument?
I have no objection.
Have any of the board members any questions for Dr. Campson? No? All right, go ahead then, please, Mr. Jones.
Thank you. Members of the board. Just by way of introduction, I'd like to indicate at the outset that the complaint in this matter seeks to have the board revoke Dr. Campson's license at this point. And I'm going to go through the findings that the Superior Court made in connection with the findings that the board had made previously and point out certain inconsistencies in what has been presented to you so far today from respondent Dr. Campson. First off, the Superior Court upheld the board's finding that Dr. Campson violated the worksite monitor requirement. The Superior Court pointed out that the evidence reflected that Dr. Campson testified that he knew that he had to have a worksite monitor, that the only one that was approved by the board was Dr. Diop, and that Dr. Diop therefore had to be with him anytime they saw patients. That's Dr. Campson's own testimony that he understood that. And the Superior Court pointed that out and said, given that admission of his, that he understood that he needed Dr. Diop to be present, the facts that the Superior Court said were disclosed by the record, and the same facts that the board found were that on a number of occasions, Dr. Campson worked when Dr. Diop was not in the office, and the Superior Court upheld the board's finding that Dr. Campson also worked on occasions when there was no physician at all in the office to monitor him. The Superior Court dismissed the argument made by Dr. Campson that there were other physicians in the office. The Superior Court pointed out, and the board rightly should recognize this, that the purpose of the worksite monitor was to have someone there who was familiar with the fact that Dr. Campson had been involved in sexual misconduct in the practice of medicine, and to be there in order to, with that knowledge, oversee to ensure that that does not occur again. Thus, the fact that there may have been other physicians there was of no moment because they were not familiar with his history of misconduct and could not properly monitor him. So that issue was determined by the Superior Court. The second issue that the Superior Court upheld is that Dr. Campson violated the requirement to have chaperones present in the November-December 2006 timeframe. The Superior Court upheld the board's finding that on 14 occasions, respondent Dr. Campson treated patients without a female chaperone present. And the Superior Court addressed the circumstances alleged by Dr. Campson that he was only there to shadow Dr. Diop. And the Superior Court, just as the medical board did, dismissed that testimony as an attempted excuse and explanation. Dr. Campson was not credited. Those facts did not exist as far as this record is concerned. The Superior Court upheld the board's finding that Dr. Campson treated patients. And you as physicians and members of the board should be well aware that the word treat is a term of art and involves the hands-on assessment of patients. So that is the fact that was upheld. And I would submit that any protestations or arguments to the contrary should be ignored. A third matter was upheld by the Superior Court, a third matter of misconduct on the part of Dr. Campson, and that was involving dishonesty in him denying in an April 2009 interview with the board and probation inspector, denying that he had ever treated female patients without a chaperone. Obviously, he had in November, December 2006, and to deny it was an instance of dishonesty on his part. So those are the three issues that call for discipline in this matter. And in assessing what is the appropriate level of discipline for those violations, it is helpful to take a look at other circumstances, some of which were pled in the accusation as disciplinary considerations. And the first question asked is, why is Dr. Campson on probation? And one must go back to 1997 and to his conduct that initially led to his surrender of the license in 1998. And the Superior Court listed in detail the conduct that Dr. Campson had engaged in at that time, just as the board's decision that the Superior Court upheld also listed the allegations and the accusation from that time. And the conduct involved Dr. Campson in treating a 17-year-old minor female patient and putting his hands upon her breast, putting his hand between her legs, rubbing her vaginal area. All of these against the protestations of the patient. The patient, once the police, thereafter, the police set up a sting. Dr. Campson came to the patient's house and reiterated that yes, he had done what was claimed he had done, that he had done those things that I just reiterated. And he said he wanted to have sex with her, and he was subsequently arrested. So that is the conduct that started Dr. Campson on the road that led to today. And you should keep that in mind in assessing what is the appropriate level of discipline. Subsequent to that conduct, Dr. Campson surrendered his license and stated in the surrender document that he would, if he in the future sought reinstatement, would admit that he had indeed engaged in sexual misconduct. Well, Dr. Campson did seek reinstatement in 2001, and at that hearing on that, he essentially said that the patient lied, that he never engaged in sexual misconduct. His reinstatement was denied. He came back in 2005 seeking reinstatement, and at this time, at the hearing on the reinstatement, he said, yes, I lied in 2001 when I said I didn't engage in sexual misconduct. And he then admitted that he had. The board also found at that time, in connection with that reinstatement, that Dr. Campson had another conviction on his record for having engaged in making loud noises in violation of Penal Code 415-2. Those circumstances involved him raising his voice to his wife in front of his child in a public setting, and that led to a conviction. Now, Dr. Campson was reinstated.
You have 1 minute, Mr. Chairman.
And now seeks to be placed on probation. I would submit that the circumstances that I described of his history indicate that he should not be now permitted to practice further. He continues, as you heard him today, to argue that he engaged in only technical violations, that he didn't really treat patients in 2006. These are statements that suggest that he really has not taken to heart, that he does not really understand the gravity of his violations, and that to permit him to be on probation and to continue to practice, it is submitted by complainant, would be to the detriment of public safety.
Thank you. Do you wish to make a responsible argument, Mr. Chairman?
Just briefly.
Go ahead.
Just to say briefly that, to be clear, we do not, Dr. Campson does not dispute that these were violations of his probation, and we do not minimize those facts. We do not dispute that he treated these patients. What we ask the board to consider are the mitigating factors. That even when he treated these patients, which was in violation of probation, that he did have a chaperone, not an approved female chaperone, but he did have a chaperone, his medical director. And it was not an intentional violation, it was something that he was confused about. So while we do not minimize the violations, we ask that the board consider those mitigating factors in evaluating the appropriate discipline. And with respect to Dr. Campson's past and again, the serious issues which he has dealt with in his life, and which I think he has worked hard to overcome, he has made significant errors and mistakes, and he has suffered, and his family has suffered, and his 3 children have suffered. And he asked for an opportunity to realize his practicing is not a right, it's a privilege, and he asked for an opportunity to resume his practice. And he asked the board to consider the entirety of the case, that while these were violations of probation, he did not act with deceit or with recalcitrance, and and not act cavalierly. And we would submit that there is an appropriate level of discipline that is short of revocation and yet will serve to rehabilitate the doctor. Thank you.
For the responsible argument.
Thank you. Dr. Campson suggests that he does not minimize the mistakes he made, that he does acknowledge the mistakes he made. However, if you review the arguments presented in writing by Dr. Campson, in both instances, both with regard to worksite monitor and with regard to probation or the chaperone requirement, if you read through his arguments, he attempts to distinguish the worksite monitor issue, saying, well, there was always a doctor present. He attempts to distinguish the chaperone requirement. Well, Dr. Diop was there, and he didn't really treat the patients. Those, in my view, are attempts to minimize the violation, and those are not the types of arguments that you should want to hear from a respondent who is seeking to continue to practice medicine. I would point out that the Superior Court, in reviewing these matters and in upholding the board's decision and factual findings with respect to the worksite monitor and with regard to the absence of that female chaperone, indicated that the board would be well within its discretion to reimpose the penalty of license revocation. I believe the complainant argues that the Superior Court judge had the proper perspective on this case. I submit that the appropriate penalty in this matter is revocation. Thank you.
Do any of the board members have any questions? All right, then we'll close the record. Off the record, please.
So what we're going to do is clear the room, and the board members and the judge and our attorneys will remain. You'll receive written notification about our decision within a timely period, and thank you very much for being.
Medical Board of California, Department of Consumer Affairs, Panel A, in the matter of the accusation against Ira Allen Jacobs, OAH case number 2012080457, agency case number 16-2008-192757. This is a reconsideration on order granting reconsideration. It is September 19th, the year 2012, approximately 12:31 p.m. Thank you. The time, date, and place set for the hearing of this matter. I'm Anne Elizabeth Starley, Administrative Law Judge with the Office of Administrative Hearings. Counsel, will you state your appearances for the record, please, beginning with Ms. Simon?
Deputy Attorney General Jane Zach Simon on behalf of the complainant.
Ms. Hanson?
Jennifer Hansen on behalf of Dr. Jacobs. I also have Pat Hooper with me today.
Will you spell Mr. Hooper's last name?
Hooper.
Thank you. And Mr. Hooper's an attorney?
Yes.
And Dr. Jacobs is present, correct?
Yes.
All right. We have scheduled 15-minute arguments by each side, followed by 5-minute arguments by each side. Also, Dr. Jacobs can testify under oath if he would like to. Do you would like to have Dr. Jacobs testify under oath?
Only if the panel has questions specifically for him.
All right. He does have a right to give a statement under oath. I can ask, after both sides have presented their discussions, I can ask the panel whether they have any questions for Dr. Jacobs. If they do, then I could place him under oath at that time. And you'll have 5-minute rebuttal arguments as well. I do have some documents that were submitted, some written arguments, respondents' written argument regarding reconsideration. Did you submit one also, counsel?
Yes, I did.
complainant's written argument regarding reconsideration, and both of those will be entered into the record. Before we begin, are there any questions our attorneys have? All right. Ms. Hanson, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. This case is about Dr. Jacobs, who's a well-qualified surgical oncologist who voluntarily surrendered his license in New Jersey. That happened after a small period of supervision, a 6-month period of supervision at Atlantic Care. But what we're really here today to discuss is the penalty imposed by the ALJ and how egregious it is given the nature of the circumstances here. The guidelines, the medical board's guidelines, do not provide us specific guidance, unfortunately, with respect to voluntary surrenders for out-of-state physicians who surrender their license out of state. And so what it appears to happen here is the administrative law judge threw in the kitchen sink in almost every single possible term of penalty that he could think of was imposed upon Dr. Jacobs. And that decision was not rationally related to the evidence at the hearing. Dr. Jacobs currently works at Amgen as a medical director. He supervises over 9 clinical trials. He deals with all the data, knows the data in and out. He's been working at Amgen for the past 4 years, not doing any sort of direct patient care. One of the examples of the egregious nature of this and irrational nature of the decision is that he imposed a non-practice provision during probation on Dr. Jacobs, along with a probation period of 3 years. Well, Dr. Jacobs is not treating patients, and so if he had to, he would clearly violate that provision just by the fact that he was continuing in his employment as a medical director at Amgen. And that's one example of how this decision is egregious. Another example is prohibition on supervision of PAs. Well, again, Dr. Jacobs isn't even doing clinical practice of medicine currently, hasn't been for the past 4 years, so that's irrational, as well as all the education courses, prescribing practices courses, medical record keeping, professionalism. None of those penalties imposed are at all rationally related to the evidence at the hearing. Just giving you an overview of Dr. Jacobs, he has done over 1,000 cases after the 6-month period of supervision in Atlantic Care that occurred in 2006 with no adverse outcomes. He moved to California in 2007, started working at Kaiser, and worked at Kaiser for over a year and a half until the end of 2008 when he got cancer. And because of his cancer, he was unable to continue practicing in the clinical practice of medicine at that time. Due to fortunate circumstances, he has recovered from cancer, but at that time, at the end of 2008, he chose to make a move to Amgen and work as the medical director, working in clinical trials. His current job requires him to travel all over the world. Basically, he has a lot of requirements. He's already going to Australia, Vienna, France in the upcoming months. And the penalty imposed here would require him to do a huge amount of education within the next 60 days that just really isn't rational to protect the public. The penalty appears to be punitive rather than rationally related to protecting the public or to rehabilitating Dr. Jacobs. For example, even the judge found that no acts were established to be committed by Dr. Jacobs in New Jersey that were substantially related to the practice of medicine in California. And that's the key here, and even the decision pointed out to the board, which you're well aware of, is the purpose is not to punish the respondent, but to protect the public and allow him a chance to rehabilitate himself. But there is no need to rehabilitate him because the issues that occurred in New Jersey at Atlanta were only requiring supervision for a 6-month period and a short probationary period of monitoring after that, and that was at the hospital. The New Jersey Medical Board never made any sort of findings against Dr. Jacobs. And that is very key here, as other cases, this is not a one-size-fits-all picture. The board really needs to evaluate the individual circumstances of this case and see that this is different, especially because New Jersey did not start their investigation until after Dr. Jacobs left New Jersey. So the first notice that he got of any sort of investigation was in November of 2007. He was well into his practice in California. He applied for his California license well before that in 2007, started practicing at Kaiser in June of 2007. And so he wasn't trying to avoid things that were going on in New Jersey to come to California. And I think that's something the board needs to take into account as well. So what would be a more rational penalty to impose on Dr. Jacobs? I posed to the board that it would be much more rational and realistic to give him a letter of public reprimand. And that's what I think would be reasonable given the voluntary surrender without any sort of findings in New Jersey and no findings presented at the hearing of any clinical deficiencies. Alternatively, if the board feels it necessary, another alternative would be to require him to go through PACE as any sort of condition precedent to going back to practice to treat patients. Dr. Jacobs does not have any intention currently of going back to treat patients in a clinical setting at this time. He does need his license. It's very important that he has his license in order to continue at his job. But because he doesn't have any intent going back to treat patients clinically, there's no need for him to go through all of these education courses at this current time. So that would be one alternative. The other alternatives could be a lower period of probation, again with PACE as a condition precedent to return to practice. I just hope that the board will make a decision that is just and rationally related to the evidence in this case, given Dr. Jacobs' circumstances. Thank you.
Thank you.
When we do the out-of-state cases, they pose some unique challenges, and often what we are confronted with is a situation where we are trying to fit a round peg into a square hole because every state does things a little bit differently. So our challenge is to look at the case and determine what does it look like, what do we do with it, how does it fit in with the disciplinary system that we have here in California. And in this case, I think we can do that pretty seamlessly. We know that Dr. Jacobs ran into some difficulties at a hospital in New Jersey, and he had what was actually a 1-year period of interaction with the hospital's peer review and disciplinary system. There was a period initially of suspension, followed by a period of supervision of 6 months, which was then followed by a 6-month period of probation. Towards the end of that period of probation, Dr. Jacobs relocated to California. And when New Jersey started its investigation and inquiry into what went on at the hospital, Dr. Jacobs made the decision not to let the New Jersey investigative process play itself out, but to surrender his license. I won't belabor the point. I think it's addressed in our briefing, but it's clear that a surrender of license under those circumstances, no matter whether you put a voluntary in front of it, it is disciplinary in nature. It simply is not a purely voluntary surrender. accepts a surrender in exchange for bringing to end an investigation. So I think the ALJ, in this case, there were a couple of places that the ALJ may have gotten a bit off track. The one was, Ms. Hanson referred to it briefly in finding that there was cause for discipline under section 2305 of the code, which allows for discipline when any discipline restrictions or conditions are placed on a license. But then finding under section 141 that the New Jersey surrender was not substantially related. Substantial relationship does not require the California board to have a lot of detail or information about the underlying out-of-state case, and it certainly does not require the California board to retry or call up evidence and determine what exactly were the surgical problems. What the cases tell us, and I cited the two cases in our written argument, the Merrick, M-A-R-E-K case, and the Medical Board versus Superior Court Lamb, L-A-M case. It means that there's a logical connection or nexus to the licensed practice. And in this case, Dr. Jacobs' problem and the inquiry in New Jersey was directly related to his surgical skills. I don't think there's any logical conclusion to be reached except that that was a substantially related issue that arose in New Jersey. So I would submit that cause for discipline was established under both sections 141 and 2305. The real issue here is, what do we do? And I think, again, we can turn to the Merrick case for that, as Merrick tells us that in situations where you have a case in which a physician enters into a disciplinary settlement with an out-of-state case without admissions or without creating a great deal of factual record, that it's incumbent upon our board to take the steps that are necessary to address the concerns that were raised. And in this case, the problem is that Dr. Jacobs left New Jersey without doing anything to satisfy the New Jersey board of his ability to practice medicine with safety to the public. So in light of, but I agree with Ms. Hanson that the specific terms and conditions of the probation in the proposed decision do seem to stray pretty far afield from the issues that were raised. There is no indication that there was anything that would suggest that Dr. Jacobs needs to complete a professionalism course or to have a great deal of continuing education. Really what we're looking at is an assessment of current competency, and I think that could be done. The discipline should bear a relationship to the underlying issues, and I think that we could, a reasonable discipline in this case would be a period of probation of probably 3 years, and Dr. Jacobs should go to PACE, and in the event that he returns to clinical practice, he should have a practice monitor. And with that type of probation, I think that we would address the concerns, the public would be protected, and Dr. Jacobs can go on about his professional life. With that, I would submit it.
Do you wish to make a rebuttal argument? Go ahead, please.
Thank you. First of all, I just would like to clarify one thing in the record, and that is that Dr. Jacobs was never suspended from Atlantic Care in New Jersey. He served a 6-month period of supervision, followed by a 6-month period of monitoring or probation, but he left before that was completed. He came to California again in 2007, and so he didn't, as the Attorney General suggested, leave New Jersey before the investigation was complete, because the investigation in New Jersey never even started until after he had moved to California. I do believe the judge had it correct with respect to section 141, that there was no evidence that any acts committed by Dr. Jacobs were substantially related to his practice in California, and I do think it was a questionable ruling with respect to the other section because there were no findings in New Jersey. Again, those cases that the department, the Attorney General cites too, I believe are distinguishable because in those cases, there was actually discipline. In the Merritt case, there was a 3-year probationary period in Nevada, and then the California Medical Board imposed the discipline. In this case, there was no discipline in New Jersey. Again, the Lamb case, there was an agreement that physician in Wisconsin could not do certain surgical procedures. And again, we cannot look to those cases, but even if you did look to them, the Lamb case only had much less egregious penalty imposed on the physician than in this case. There were no admissions here by Dr. Jacobs in surrender of his New Jersey license. We have to look at the rational relationship. Even the Attorney General agrees that the penalty imposed is not rationally related. One additional point I want to make was the solo practice prohibition. Again, that is irrational and illogical since Dr. Jacobs is not currently doing clinical practice. Again, I don't want to use up the board's time. I want to just make a point that if PACE is imposed, it's not necessary at this time. PACE, we agree, if the board doesn't agree to a letter of reprimand, which we think is the most logical and rational penalty to impose, PACE could be imposed as a condition precedent to return to practice. But that would be more rationally related to the evidence that was presented at hearing, and we hope that the board that makes a decision that is just and fair to Dr. Jacobs given the circumstances. Thank you.
Very briefly, I think it's important to keep in mind that the order that the board is tasked with issuing can't be tied to what is Dr. Jacobs' current job. He is a licensed physician. We don't know whether he'll be at his current job tomorrow, next year, 2 years from now. What we have to do is make sure that Dr. Jacobs is a competent physician. The problem with saying that he only has to do PACE if he returns to clinical practice, a probation has a lifetime, has a period of years. It's not in the public interest to just let the period of years pass without making sure that Dr. Jacobs comes out of the probation. We've done our job, and we know that he has demonstrated the competency that needs to be demonstrated. He is practicing medicine now, when told he's just not practicing clinical medicine. So I think it's important to bear in mind as you fashion whatever decision you end up fashioning in this case, that we do have to look at the big picture here and make sure that we have addressed the concerns that were brought to this board as a result of the New Jersey surrender.
Thank you. Do you wish your client to testify?
Only if the board has any questions, I would like to offer Dr. Jacobs is here today. He does take this very seriously. It's very, very important to him. And so if the board does have any questions of him, he is available to answer any questions.
Does anyone have any questions? Okay, let me place the doctor under oath first. Please stand and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Have a seat, please. And for the record, to be clear, please state your name and spell it.
IRA Jacobs, Jacobs.
Thank you. Go ahead.
The work at Amgen is going to continue for a period of time without treating any patients directly?
Correct. So I work at Amgen now, which is a biotechnology company running clinical trials. And I don't see that changing in the foreseeable future.
Any other questions? Thank you. And that was Dr. Sylvia Diego, correct? Thank you. Any other questions? Anything further, councils, before we close this record?
No, Your Honor.
Nothing further. The record is closed. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to clear the room, and council will be notified in an appropriate time what the decision was.
Thank you very much.
She needs some information.
Medical Board of California, Department of Consumer Affairs, State of California, Panel A, in the matter of the accusation against Sridhara Iyengar, I apologize if I mispronounced, OAH number 20120804559. The original OAH number on this matter on the accusation was 201009065. This is a hearing on an order of non-adoption. I'm Ann Elizabeth Sarley, Administrative Law Judge with the Office of Administrative Hearings. It is September 19th, the year 2012, 1:48 p.m., the time, date, and place set for the hearing of this matter. Counsel, will you state your appearance for the record, please?
Good afternoon, Your Honor, and members of the panel. E.A. Jones III, Supervising Deputy Attorney General, on behalf of the complainant.
Thank you. Counsel?
And thank you, Your Honor, and the panel. Carlo Coppo, COPPO, Carlo Coppo and Popke for Dr. Iyengar.
Thank you. And Dr. Iyengar is present.
That's correct.
All right, but the way we're going to proceed is each side is going to have 15 minutes to present an opening argument and then 5 minutes to present a closing argument. And you may call your client to testify if you so wish, counsel. And counsels, when would be an appropriate time to call the doctor to testify so that we don't interrupt the flow of your arguments?
I would suggest at the end of the argument. That's my suggestion.
Comfortable with that, Mr. Jones?
Yes.
All right, we'll do it that way then. All right, anything before we proceed, counsels?
Come in.
Yes. I have a procedural motion to make.
Yes.
I anticipate that the record today includes the arguments, the written arguments that the parties have provided to the board. And with respect to the written argument provided by Respondent's Counsel, I'd like to make a motion to strike the argument in Roman numeral 6 on page 12 through the middle of page 13 on the basis that it appears to be new evidence that is being offered, and on the argument being that the proceeding today is to be based on the record as it was created at the administrative hearing.
Mr. Coco, I'll give you an opportunity to respond, but for the record, I have received complainant's non-adoption argument and written argument of Dr. Iyengar regarding order of non-adoption of proposed decisions. These two documents are in evidence, and we're referring now to page 12 and 13 of Dr. Iyengar's argument.
Yes, the reference.
I'm sorry, Roman numeral number 6. Yes, Mr. Coco.
Yeah, the reference in Roman numeral 6 was not intended, nor is it new evidence. It's simply a citation to a legal precedent before this board. On that, I would submit to that.
Counsel?
Well, I don't believe there's any reference made to a precedential decision of the medical board. The medical board has a procedure which by law, by which it can make cases precedential. And I don't believe that the cases referred to by counsel fall under that category, and therefore represents offering new evidence at this point.
There's also a reference to the annual reports of the medical board since 2006 and reference to 9 other physicians. This is not a precedential decision to my knowledge, Mr. Coppola. Do you know otherwise?
No.
All right. I'm going to strike Roman numeral 6 in its entirety from the written argument of Dr. Agar as being outside the scope of this proceeding and relying on facts that are not in evidence in the underlying matter. Any other matters, council? All right, Mr. Cole, wish to make an opening argument?
I do, thank you. Please, Your Honor, and the panel, it's a great opportunity to be here. I've been doing this for about 17 years and have had the privilege of being before a panel before, so my client and I appreciate it. I only have 15 minutes, so I'll get right to the 3 points I want to make. And the first point is, it's our position as set forth in my final argument to Judge Aylers and also in the papers, that the accusation in this case, in our opinion, should never have been filed and should be dismissed. In the alternative, we would suggest that at the very most, given the lowest rung of professional conduct that I have ever seen that this case involves, a letter of reprimand would be arguably appropriate under the circumstances, especially considering the fact, which I'll touch in a moment, that the Medical Executive Committee of Fountain Valley Hospital, who addressed this issue in detail back in 2008, imposed 7 levels of discipline upon Dr. Iyengar, which remain in effect to this date and will remain in effect for the rest of his practicing career at the hospital. The second point I'm going to make, and I'll expand on in a moment, is that the level of conduct, if it can be described as such in this case, that's referenced both in the accusation and in the evidence, essentially asks this panel, this board, to be the quote-unquote moral police, and that's a phrase that came from Dr. Mata's husband, not from me, moral police to review what Judge Aylers described as immature and bothersome conduct. And I'm going to repeat that, immature and bothersome conduct. That's what's being asked of this panel, and that's why Judge Aylers believes that a 90-day suspension, which will essentially destroy this man's remaining career, such as it is, he thinks is appropriate. We strongly disagree with that. The third point I'm going to touch on is the precipitating event in this case, which was the surgical procedure, the open heart procedure, that is the fulcrum of Dr. Iyengar's specialty for the last 45 years, in which there was a legitimate clinical disagreement between Dr. Iyengar as the captain of the ship and Dr. Mila as the anesthesiologist over how many and how much and how soon the blood products should be supplied to a man who was bleeding out. That was the precipitating event that led to the emotional disagreement between these two that led to this accusation. So let me go to the first point first. We've said in our papers, and I'll repeat it here, that the punishment doesn't fit the crime. The crime is the conduct, the level of conduct that I described, as described by Judge Aylers. In the accusation, you have 4 individual events that are alleged to have occurred that lead to the request for, initially, for revocation of this man's license. Let's put it in context. In 1992 and 1993, after Dr. Iyengar had been on the medical staff of Fountain Valley Hospital for 2 or 3 years, the MBC came to him and said, we have 2 complaints that you kissed 2 ladies on the cheek. That's inappropriate. We think we need to take some sanctions against you, and we think you need to go to a boundaries course in order to learn how to be a better citizen. He accepted that. He went to the boundaries course. He eventually had his probation reduced in 1998, I believe it was. But between 1992 and 1993, until 2007, my math is correct, that's roughly 15 or 14 years of being in the crucible of the OR doing major heart procedures, there were absolutely no complaints about Dr. Iyengar's personal behavioral conduct, none whatsoever. And that's what the record reflects. In 2007, Dr. Iyengar was involved in a serious heart case with Dr. Myla as the anesthesiologist. Dr. Myla testified in her testimony that from the time they got to the OR, the time they left, roughly 8 to 9 hours transpired when they were either in the same room or interacting with each other. At some point in time, maybe 5 or 6 hours into this procedure, and Dr. Iyengar will expand on this in a statement he would like to recite to the board. He's very nervous about this, so he'll probably have to read it to you. I ask that you indulge him. It's hopefully less than the 5 minutes allotted to him. At that point in time, Dr. Iyengar became aware that blood platelets had not been given properly or in a timely way by Dr. Myla. And he raised his voice and asked her why they had not been given. She said he used the word hell. She testified that in her entire clinical career, being in the OR, no physician had ever used the word hell. She testified that she was momentarily upset, but it passed immediately. Another 2.5 or 3 hours went by in the surgery where Dr. Iyengar essentially saved the patient's life, gave the proper blood products, at least supervised their giving, and he will expand on that in his statement. 2 days later, Dr. Iyengar was in the doctor's lounge intending to approach Dr. Myla to dispel between them the level of discourse that they engaged in over the blood products. He admitted he raised his voice and he was upset about that. So he thought he would approach her and essentially smooth things over. Again, put this into context of from the time Dr. Iyengar got to the hospital in roughly 1990 up until 2007, he and Dr. Myla have been in surgery over 2,000 times with as many as 8 to 10 to 12 people in the OR during that period of time. So you can look at the number of witnesses, the number of potential incidents, and the minimal interference with anyone's practice of medicine that the conduct in question involves. He approached her and said he went to hug her and put his arms on her to hug her. She said he held the hug too long. I often refer to this as the excessive hug case. He attempted to kiss her on the cheek, which she says she rebuffed. And that was the end of it, except she says that he said to her, "This from a man who does not drink, I'd like to see you drunk. Do you drink Black Label or Blue Label?" He denies making those comments. He denied them then. He denied them to the MBC. There were witnesses in the room when these things occurred. The witnesses did not see the hug. They really can't help us either way. So it's strictly a credibility issue between Dr. Myla and Dr. Iyengar. Following that, Dr. Myla went to the MBC and asked for an investigation. As a result of the investigation, the MBC imposed the following 7 conditions on Dr. Iyengar. 1, he was chief of surgery at the time. They asked him to step down as chief of surgery. There's testimony that chief of surgery can lead to chief of staff-elect in the hierarchy of hospital politics. It can also lead to the position of chief of staff. He lost all of those because he stepped down at the request of the MBC. Number 2, they filed an 805 report. I've often referred to the 805 report as the scarlet letter, which hangs around a doctor's neck for the rest of his or her life. It's a fact of life. They filed an 805 report. Thirdly, they asked Dr. Iyengar to go to a boundaries course presented by Elizabeth Becker, who you may or may not know, and it's in the testimony, founded the boundaries course for PACE at UCSD back in the early 90s. He did go through that course, passed it with flying colors, and she in fact testified that there's no harm and no threat to anyone. He also had to write 2 letters of apology, one to the MBC and one to Dr. Mala, which he did. And most significantly, he was placed under a zero tolerance behavioral policy contract at the hospital in 2008, which is in place today and will stay in place for the rest of his practice at the hospital. And most importantly, who is the moral police for Dr. Iyengar right now? It is Dr. Mila. She is chief of staff. She has the duty to enforce that behavioral contract. There have been absolutely no incidents whatsoever since 2007 till the present time. She testified she has not initiated any action against Dr. Iyengar because there is no reason to. So we have these 4 isolated incidents between 2005 and 2007 identified in the accusation that were isolated out of about a 25-year period. For that, the ALJ recommends a 90-day suspension, which will essentially terminate this doctor's career. I know my time is short, so let me get to the couple of final points. And
You've
this
still got about 11 minutes.
How did it go so fast? But let me talk for a second about Hetty Sheft. She's identified as HS in the complaint. I guess I can mention her name because her name is in the investigation report. But essentially, Ms. Sheft testified that she was
Excuse me, does this name have to be abbreviated for the sake of the record?
Let's HS. Let's call it HS.
Madam Reporter, will you refer to that woman's name as HS, please?
HS essentially testified that she's a nurse with 42 years experience, a lot of it in the OR. She came in to testify, and the gist of her testimony is as follows. She worked at the hospital for approximately 1 year as director of perioperative services. That's important because in that role as director of perioperative services, she has, in part, one of her duties, what she testified to report any problems between nurses and physicians that may come to her attention during that period of time. Absolutely none, except for the one incident, came to her attention during that 1 year. Number 2, she testified that Dr. Iyengar never, ever touched her, inappropriately or otherwise. 2, she testified that on 2 occasions he made the following comment, or words to the effect, "You are my one true love." He said it twice in a year. Number 3, she testified she was not offended by that remark. Number 4, she said she did not take the remark seriously. Number 5, when she eventually left the hospital, she said, she testified under oath, Dr. Iyengar's remarks had absolutely nothing to do with her leaving the hospital. 6, as I mentioned, during the 1 year as Director of Perioperative Services, no other nurse came to her attention who had any problems whatsoever with Dr. Iyengar. And lastly, she did not report this incident for several months, and it wasn't until Dr. M came to her after she had initiated her complaint with the MBC and said, "Can you recall any incidents involving Dr. Iyengar?" And she said, "Yes, on 2 occasions." He said, "You're my one true love." So that's the testimony of HS. Again, in the hierarchy of human interaction, if you isolate those 2 comments in a 1-year period set against a 25-year period, I ask you whether or not that kind of conduct rises to the level of unprofessional conduct under 2234, or was there clear and convincing evidence that it establishes unprofessional conduct? And I suggest that it did not, and it does not, and cannot. Nor does it indicate any unfitness to practice medicine. Secondly, as to Dr. M, she's been a practicing anesthesiologist for 25 plus years. As I mentioned, if you interpret the numbers in the testimony, she's been in well over 2,000 surgeries with Dr. Iyengar. Probably 1,500 before the events, at least 1,000 she testified after 2000 up to 2007. and several hundred after 2007, when she brought the excessive hug matter to the attention of the MEC. She added to the excessive hug case a recollection that she had that in one surgery, sometime before that, Dr. Iyengar is alleged to have said while she was in the room, "Oh, Dr. Myla is here. There's a cardiac surgeon or cardiologist that when she sees him, her brassiere gets wet." That is alleged to have been something that he said. He absolutely denied that comment to the MEC. He denied it at the hearing, and he denies it today. Yet it is one of her allegations. Setting that aside, the difference of opinion over the hug in the doctor's lounge, and I reiterate, there are at least 2 or 3 other doctors within visible distance of this excessive hug who commented that they saw nothing untoward that occurred. She accuses Dr. Iyengar of a few, quote, uncomfortable, close quote, remarks over a 20-plus year period. And yet, if you look at the motivation for it, and perhaps the motivation is or is not relevant here, but the fact is that they had a clinical disagreement over these blood products in which Dr. Iyengar raised his voice. She got upset. They spent another 3 hours in the OR without incident. When they both tried to amend the situation so they could continue to work together, which, by the way, they have for the next 4 years, without incident, 300 or 400 surgeries, they had a disagreement over whether or not he hugged her too long, and she contended that it was inappropriate. And there's absolutely no evidence whatsoever, in fact it's stated in one of the footnotes in the AG's report, that any connection with patient care in this case is so attenuated that it be non-existent. The only interference with patient care in this case, truthfully, was Dr. Myla's failure to give the blood products in time, and Dr. Iyengar, as the captain of the ship, coming to the assistance of the patient, giving the blood products, and there was no harm whatsoever to the patient. But that wasn't Dr. Myla's doing, it was Dr. Iyengar. She obviously, to me, it was a fair image, she got upset about it. She felt dispirited about her failure, and she felt that Dr. Iyengar somehow shouldn't have raised his voice. Again, to me, that isn't the kind of conduct that constitutes unprofessional conduct, unfitness to practice medicine, nor should he be under, what, a behavioral microscope for those kinds of comments in the future. However, Dr. Iyengar abided by every single restriction that the hospital placed on him. He gave up his chief of surgery position. He gave up his potential for future leadership positions. He went to Elizabeth Becker's course. She testified he's no risk to anyone. He also had a board-certified psychiatrist who's been retained by this board and your Attorney General to testify on cases like this, who said he's absolutely no harm to any patient or any person in the hospital. And remember, there's never been a single patient complaint about Dr. Iyengar ever, and there's none in the record, nor could there be. In conclusion, I think I've fairly well summarized it. Let me just check my notes. I think in conclusion, I'm going to reassert what I said to Judge Aders. Judge Aders clearly didn't like Dr. Iyengar, and that's the privilege of an administrative law judge. You draw inferences about the credibility of witnesses, but clearly if you read his decision, I think what he signaled at the beginning was this was a very, very low level of conduct. Why else would you say Dr. Iyengar's unprofessional conduct was thoughtless, juvenile, and crude? Dr. Iyengar is an immature and bothersome man. Now, is the standard of this board, is the standard under 2234 that you are going to monitor and discipline and suspend a person because one administrative law judge and 3 witnesses over a 26-year period characterize him as an immature and bothersome man. He is a superlative, impeccable, board-certified cardiovascular surgeon who trained under the best in Texas and has saved lives over the last 45 years. So my suggestion is, I don't think the accusation should have been filed. If you find otherwise, I suggest the letter of reprimand will leave in place all the sanctions at Fountain Valley Hospital, and you can be guaranteed that Dr. Iyengar is in anyone's presence in the future, he's even going to think about shaking your hand. And that's what Judge Ayler said. All you can do, doctor, is shake someone's hand. You cannot kiss them on the cheek. Perish the thought, here it goes to Paris, what's going to happen. You cannot kiss anyone on the cheek. You certainly can't kiss them on the hand. Thank you.
Mr. Jones?
Thank you, Your Honor. It's complainant's position that the proper discipline in this case should include probation along with the recommended suspension. A review of the facts, I think, is required here. In connection with that, it's complainant's recommendation that the board of the panel adopt the factual findings of the administrative law judge. He did a very thorough job of setting forth those facts in his opinion, and is reflected in complainant's brief. Those facts that he set forth there are supported by record citations throughout. Addressing some of the particulars now, the incidents involving SM, who has been pointed out is an anesthesiologist and currently the chief of staff at the hospital. The first one alleged and the first one found by the ALJ deals with the statement in the OR with regard to SM, where the doctor said, you should have seen Dr. SM when Dr. Abraham was around. Her brassiere got all wet. The ALJ found that Dr. SM took great offense to that it distracted her from her duties as an anesthesiologist at that point. With regard to that finding of fact, the ALJ noted that Dr. Iyengar was deliberately false, engaged in a deliberate falsehood in his testimony. In other words, the ALJ said that Dr. Iyengar lied, and he said that that statement never took place. In the second incident involving SM, the reference obviously to what happened in the lounge, the doctor's lounge, you heard an explanation from counsel that is at some rather significant divergence from the facts, and more particularly his description, counsel's description of what Dr. Iyengar said happened. The record reflects that Dr. Iyengar told his psychologist, who evaluated him regarding this case, that it was Dr. SM who attempted to hug him, and that he then followed through with it, which is totally divergent from the facts that the ALJ found in this case. Specifically, that it was Dr. SM's attempt to discuss the situation that had occurred the day before in the OR, but that Dr. Iyengar immediately seized her by the shoulder, gave her a hug, and then kissed her and made the statements that the ALJ found were made. That is that I've never kissed you before. I want to take you out and see you get drunk. Do you like black label or blue label? Those are the statements that Dr. Iyengar made. And you should accept the findings of the ALJ to that effect. And to assist you in accepting them, the corroborating evidence that the ALJ cited for the various incidents involving SM included a testimony of Dr. Abraham about the wet brassiere statement, confirming that it was made. It included SM's own contemporaneous notes about the various incidents. It included a member of the hospital custodial staff who was present in the lounge. It included SM telling her husband what happened, and her husband calling up Dr. Iyengar and talking to him and telling him he shouldn't do that ever again. Those individuals all testified credibly according to the ELJ and support the factual finding that the ELJ made that Dr. Iyengar lied about that incident in the OR with regard to the lip procedure. The other incidents involved in this case involved, first off, HS, a registered nurse, who testified that Dr. Iyengar attempted to hug and kiss her, but that she stepped aside, and that he had been discussing with her, the statement by counsel that Dr. Iyengar never touched her is only significant because it only is factually true because HS avoided the hug and the kiss that were in the incident involving KF, who was a board-certified general surgeon, a peer for Dr. Iyengar, involved, first off, Dr. Iyengar asking Dr. KF to come over so that he could look at her hand, on which she apparently had a new wedding band. And instead of looking at it, he seized her hand and he kissed it with his lips and his tongue. And according to KF, as found by the ELJ, she was freaked out. And that kind of conduct, let me hold comments on the type of conduct there is, but factually, that's what happened. KF told her partner, Dr. Report, about this incident immediately after. The ELJ found that to be corroborating evidence. In looking at Dr. Iyengar's statements, the ELJ found that he was, as I indicated, deliberately untruthful with regard to whether the repair statement was made. He was, again, deliberately untruthful as to whether he kissed the back of KF's hand around that he had. The ELJ discredited Dr. Iyengar with regard to his interactions with HS. So Dr. Iyengar comes before this panel with a very poor credibility record as found by the ALJ. So I believe the incidents as found by the judge occurred. Significantly, there was expert testimony that these types of incidents should not be ignored. Dr. Suzanne Fiedler testified on behalf of the complainant and pointed out that the Joint Commission, which is formerly the Joint Commission on Accreditation of Healthcare Organizations, JACO, had issued a sentinel event alert that pointed out that there was an established correlation between disruptive personal behavior and patient safety in a healthcare setting, and recommended that healthcare agencies, healthcare facilities, put into place a policy that would foster patient care and prevent unprofessional conduct through the type of disruptive behavior that's involved in this case. And I think it's significant that the administrative law judge pointed out that not only did respondent's conduct, as established by the expert testimony, represent unprofessional conduct, but was, as part of that, it was an abuse of authority since Dr. Iyengar held several positions in the hospital. Now, it's been suggested by counsel that the board should leave, perhaps abandon its obligations to ensure public safety by leaving the issue of respondents' unprofessional conduct to the policing of the local hospital. I would suggest that the board cannot rely on the local hospital and whatever politics may be fomented there for public protection. I think the thing that's most significant to me in reviewing complainants, reviewing respondents' written argument is that he points out that with regard to the SM incident in the lounge, that his client was only trying to make a reasonable attempt to make amends for the clinical disagreement he had. And if his client views hugging and kissing in an unwanted manner at a peer as a reasonable attempt at reconciliation, it appears that he has not taken to heart or to otherwise the lessons that presumably Dr. Becker and Ms. Becker had imparted to him. And most significant in this regard is the statement in the brief of respondent that Dr. Iyengar does not know why SM made the complaints that she made about his conduct. He doesn't know why she complained about those statements that are the issue in this case. That to me suggests that he just basically doesn't understand the issues involving professionalism in the workplace, that he, despite the fact he claims that he successfully completed the boundaries course with Ms. Becker, he still doesn't get it. And therefore, the appropriate level of discipline to ensure that he doesn't make comments about the appearance of colleagues, the attractiveness of colleagues, to members of the opposite sex, the dating practices of colleagues, or the private conduct of colleagues, and that touching, hugging, and kissing colleagues or attempting to show affection is totally inappropriate and an abuse of authority. If you cannot understand that, then it is appropriate to put him on probation to ensure that he does not engage in such future behavior. Putting him on probation will provide the board with a mechanism to take immediate action against any future misconduct on his part. Overhanging his head will be the possibility of revocation based on a probation violation should he engage in such conduct. It's complainant's position that the issuance of the reprimand just does not serve to bring respondent's attention, to focus his attention on his responsibilities in this regard. And therefore recommends that a significant probation period be covered with recommended suspension as appropriate discipline.
Thank you. Mr. Capone, you have 5 more minutes.
Sure, just a couple of points. One, let me dispel one comment that the Deputy Attorney General who wrote the papers made a misstatement on page 9, lines 16 to 18. His new counsel has repeated, just as previous counsel repeated. Dr. M's husband testified at page, it's 82 and 83 and 139 and 40 of volume 1. He testified in 1992, 1993. His wife came to him and said, Dr. Iyengar has been making some unwanted advances to me. And he talked to Dr. Iyengar and said, these are inappropriate. Please don't do them again. There's actually no testimony in the record, and it's a complete misstatement on page 9, that Dr. M ever mentioned anything to her husband after the hugging incident in the doctor's lounge in 2007. It simply did not happen. It's not in the record. And let's take that one step further. Why didn't it happen? Because it wasn't that significant an event at the time. It was two people coming together to make amends over a raised voice after a failure to deliver critical products to a patient. Now, look at the other side. Dr. Iyengar was, as I said, the captain of the ship. There was a serious miscalculation by the anesthesiologist. And yet all he did in reaction to that was to attempt to make amends for the situation. Who hugged who? Does that really matter? If she had her arms out, he had his arms out. Again, if you look at her testimony, you'll find in her testimony at one point she said, by the way, in India, you don't touch other people. Well, that's not true. The gentleman to my left is of Indian descent. His tribe does touch people. They hug, they kiss on the cheek, and they may kiss a hand, and they raise it to their forehead. Dr. Myla, that's not her tribe. She doesn't do that. She wants to impose her morality on everyone else. We cannot use the lowest common denominator of conduct as the standard for this board under 2234. Lastly, as far as relying on Fountain Valley, they are there every single day to watch what Dr. Iyengar does. You know, because you've seen other cases like this, hospitals have a hierarchy of peer review and disciplinary systems within them, the committee system, that can investigate anyone at any time for improper conduct, far beyond what a probation officer can do sitting in his or her office in San Bernardino and trying to relate to what Dr. Iyengar is doing in Fountain Valley. So yes, there is an absolute effective mechanism. He's on a zero tolerance policy. Lastly, Dr. Abraham testified that the comments that Dr. Iyengar had made, he said, he's always joking. His usual tone is joking. I don't take it serious. That's what doctors do. It happens in the OR all the time. These are just offhand comments. Some people are offended by them. Some people are not. This is the OR. This is the crucible of very serious medicine. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. 5 minutes?
I would just want to point out that the respondent was previously disciplined for similar behavior and served a period of probation. Here he is again today with allegations once again. It does not make sense to suggest that his conduct can be corralled and allied reprimand where in the past he suffered probation, and I believe that probation for a period of time was indeed effective and would again be effective. Now, it's note that it appears that in this scenario, in the arguments made, that the respondent is more interested in attacking the victims, the motivation of the victims, and attacking why they might have complained, and recognizing that his conduct is the issue that must be addressed. And I believe that placing him on probation, as argued previously, would be the most effective way to restrain his future conduct. In that regard, I again emphasize that you have expert testimony that supports the violations found, and you have the Joint Commission underlining and emphasizing the potential harm to patient care that can result where a physician is not mindful of the social mores that must play out in a healthcare setting. Thank you.
Counsel, you wish to have your client testify?
Yes, he's got about a 5-minute statement. He's very nervous. He's going to have to read it to you if it's okay.
Dr. Lee, raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Yes, sir. Have a seat, please. And for the record, will you state your name and spell it?
Yes. My name is Sridhara, middle initial K.S. Iyengar. First name, I'll spell it. S like Sam, R like Robert, I, D for David, X for Harry, A for Apple, R for Robert, A for Apple. Middle initial, K for King, S for Sam. Last name, Iyengar, I-Y, E-N, G like George, A like Apple, R like Robert.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. Please permit me non-specific nature. I would like to read out what I wrote last night. Please permit me.
Keep your voice up loud so the reporter can hear the word.
Yes.
And also, when we read, we tend to speak a little faster. Madam Reporter may have to slow you down at times. Feel free to do that, Madam Reporter, if it's necessary.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, and ladies and gentlemen. I apologize for causing you to devote time from your important schedules to hear this matter. The purpose of this hearing, as I understand it, is to ensure patient care and to protect the public. I strongly believe in providing the highest level of patient care. It has been and will always be my sole and unwavering focus. I am proud of the fact that during the past more than 44 years I have been practicing medicine, I have never received a single patient complaint. However, in the interest of time, I will not narrate my life story or detail the tremendous joy of each professional success during my years of practice. This has been briefly mentioned in the documents submitted for your kind perusal. Instead, I will discuss one date, November 28, 2007, no different from any other in one crucial way. On that date, I was solely and unwaveringly focused on protecting the life of a patient. The patient was a 50-year-old married father. He had suffered an acute heart attack, blocked coronary arteries, and a badly leaking heart valve, and needed urgent open heart surgery. Before commencing the surgery, as is my routine, I provided the anesthesiologist and surgical team with a detailed explanation of the patient's relevant medical background. Specifically, I carefully explained that the patient was a very high-risk candidate, that he had been on major blood-thinning medications and thus posed an increased risk of bleeding, and that appropriate reversing clotting factors were ordered by me beforehand. Surgery commenced approximately around 9 o'clock in the morning, and by 12 noon, I finished completing the surgery, replacing the heart valve and triple coronary artery bypass surgery, and the patient was off the heart-lung machine, and we were about to close the chest. Unfortunately, as I have mentioned earlier, he was on major blood-thinning medications before surgery, and he continued to bleed. It was just like squeezing a wet sponge. I inspected every way, there was no surgical.
Wait, I inspected what?
I inspected the whole operative site. It was not a surgical bleed. What I mean by surgical bleed is, if there is a hole, you put a stitch and you close it. If there is no surgical bleed, it is oozing all over because of the chemical factor, because of the medications he was on. So I requested the anesthesiologist to give the patient appropriate clotting factors. I had already ordered 4 units of platelets, fresh frozen plasma, cryoprecipitate. And I assumed in about 10-15 minutes, the patient slowed down the bleeding. And I assume she has given what I requested her to give. So I closed the chest, and we are still in the operating room. Patient is under anesthesia, and the patient started bleeding profusely. And immediately I had to reopen the chest, and I look around, and there is no surgical bleed, it is still chemical bleed. I requested again to give more clotting factors. And to my surprise, nearly 2 hours later, with the patient still bleeding profusely, I first learned that no additional clotting factors had been provided to this patient. I also learned that contrary to my request, only 1 unit of platelet pheresis had been given originally at 12 o'clock in the afternoon. I was perplexed. I wouldn't be surprised if any of you were surgeons if you are perplexed at this stage. I had emphasized the necessity of clotting factors before surgery and requested clotting factors during surgery. Since my very first request for clotting factors at noon, the anesthesiologist, the surgical team, and I were in constant communication with the anesthesiologist as to what to do, how we can control these things. And the bleeding was obvious. We had been continually replacing the patient's blood loss, and if you replace a lot of blood, the patient will develop reaction to the transfused blood. Yet, we were about to lose him because clotting factors had not been given. And I was not prepared to take that as an excuse and lose a patient of mine. Immediately, instinctually, I called the circulating nurse to get the clotting factors from the blood bank and tell the anesthesiologist to transfuse them. I was uncharacteristically affected. I spoke loudly, deliberately, and impolitely. But what I conveyed was critical to saving our patient's life. With the clotting factors in factor 7, the bleeding got under full control and we finished the surgery successfully. And by 4 p.m. we transferred the patient to the intensive care unit. He was stable, but he was still critical. Though the surgical team unnecessarily suffered with 3 avoidable hours of excruciating stress in the operating room. The patient ultimately did not. He did well, and he went on by the 6th day of his surgery. I was proud of the team for averting a tragedy, but was not pleased with the circumstances that threatened our patient's life. Yet, perhaps because our patient was ultimately unharmed, I regretted my uncharacteristic response to learning the cause of his near-fatal bleeding. I never doubted that the substance of my communication was necessary under the circumstances, yet felt that an apology was proper. And that was my sole intention when the anesthesiologist and I met in the doctor's dining room at 2 in the afternoon on November 30th, 2007. The fact remains that in the operating room 2 days earlier, on November 28th, I was solely focused on protecting our patient's life. Father of a young girl and husband of a young lady. I was unwavering when I learned that my request had gone unheeded and we nearly lost him. My response helped save the patient. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I demand a surgeon who is skilled, conscientious, and even firm when necessary to take care of my wife, my children, and anybody in the panel or others, including myself, under those circumstances. Such surgeons should be commended and not punished. Yet, and also, ladies and gentlemen, Your Honor, I have worked for almost 45 years as a doctor. I have worked with so many doctors, so many anesthesiologists, and so many hospitals, so many nurses. Nobody has seen a complaint against me up until this one incident. Yet, I now face recommended suspension of my license to practice medicine and probation. Yet death knell for a professional who has devoted nearly 3/4 of his life to achieve flawless patient care. I face this punishment despite having been sanctioned severely by the Medical Executive Committee after due deliberation in 2008. During the trying 4 years since, I have suffered crippling financial losses, including nearly 60% of my practice and several opportunities to advance my career in major medical centers. Worse, I have been humiliated, which for any decent human being is one of the most painful forms of punishment. I will suffer this humiliation for the rest of my life. I strive to provide optimal care during my 39 years of practice before November 28, 2007. I believe I did so on November 28, 2007. And despite the pain I will forever experience in my personal and professional life, I have done so in the years since and will continue to do so for as long as I am permitted. Thank you, Your Honor, and ladies and gentlemen. I'll answer any question you have.
Thank you.
Just give me one minute.
Mr. Jones, it's my understanding that you have a right to ask questions of the doctor if you so choose. Is that your understanding as well?
Yes, Your Honor.
Do you wish to ask any questions in a moment?
Thanks, Your
I don't have any questions with regard to the statement made by the doctor, inasmuch as it does not really bear on the issues that are before you.
All right, thank you. Do any of the board members have any questions for the doctor? Dr. Salmonson?
Right, or it could be the counsel. I just want to make sure that there weren't any other errors in the case summary. And I'm referring to the statement on February 17th, 1995, that the doctor signed a stipulation regarding some unprofessional conduct. Was that in fact a stipulation?
Yes, it was.
So chose to do that. In that case, there was the, I guess by that, the statement that it was inappropriate conduct. Is that right? It was the unprofessional conduct. So that was discipline for unprofessional conduct that you accepted or chose not to fight that, you accepted that stipulation? I don't know if you could give me some clarification.
Yes, that is correct, yeah. It was, the allegations were unwanted familiarities in the stipulation. He did sign that and accepted that without contest at that time, yes.
And then it was a very moving story about the case. I guess I'm a little confused. So the anesthesiologist then lodged this complaint because of that you spoke harshly, and you feel that triggered, I'm not clear, that this was a harsh thing? I mean, I'm confused because I had a whole different concept of what the complaint was, the touching or whatever, not that it was harsh speaking in the operating room. I'm maybe missing something.
Just briefly, the allegations and the accusation, the findings by the ALJ relate to what happened 2 days later in the lounge. They don't relate to specifically what happened in the OR.
Okay, because the explanation seemed to be regarding the harsh speaking. I wasn't, maybe I'm missing or not missing.
Yeah, well.
Go ahead.
Yeah, the genesis of the incident in the lounge was 2 days before in surgery when Dr. Iyengar raised his voice to deal with the issue of her not delivering the blood product. 2 days later, he approached her and she said she approached him in order to settle that professional clinical disagreement between the two of them. They're directly related. They wouldn't have been talking about it otherwise. They had no procedures. The incident happened on Wednesday. They had no procedures on Thursday. They met in the lounge on Friday afternoon. Yes. That was the genesis of let's get on with our professional lives. Okay. I'm going to approach you and try to amend it. And she said she was trying to approach him to get over the disagreement. That was the genesis. And then it became a disagreement over the quality of the hug and whether he said something about alcohol.
Yes, and then the wet brassiere thing, and what, I'm curious, I thought there was a statement from a Dr. Reginald Abraham, also a general surgeon slash, I think he's described as both general surgeon and cardiothoracic surgeon, who also thought he heard the wet brassiere thing. Is that inaccurate?
That is accurate.
Collaborated or corroborated?
He testified that he did hear the comment. Yes.
Any other questions from any of the panel members? Yes, Dr. Bishop, thank you.
Kind of an arcane question, I guess, but what's your customary practice when you're evaluating bleeding as you described? What do they do at Fountain Valley Hospital when you're have a patient off pump that's now bleeding? Do you use any laboratory values? Is it based pretty much on just the clinical bleeding, which is acceptable certainly, but I was wondering if you had any other.
Yeah, unfortunately, having practiced for 35 years now, heart surgery, it's very difficult. There is no lab test that is going to tell you other than PT-PDT, INR that we do, and we give protamine and other.
You have to keep your voice up so she can hear you, sir.
Oh, sorry. Protamine, other products that we give for the normal PT-PDT and INR values, or ACT. There is no other definite diagnostic lab test.
Do you not use a TEG in
And
your OR?
we're not come to that level yet, not yet. So, and we go by practice and give, and when all else fail, we give factor 7. And factor 7 is a charm drug, and it stops all the bleeding.
Very good.
And that's what we did.
Any other questions? All right. Councils, any other matters before we close the record? The record is closed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, appreciate it.
And there is a reporter form that Madam Reporter will give you before you leave.
Very good. Thank you very much, that was appreciate it.
We're going to clear the room after you get the information. You'll receive the information via the mail when we, it's on the faster.
Very good.
You won't
Thank you.
receive the information today.
Thank you, sir.
Madam President, we need to take about a 10-minute break. We got
Yeah, that's fine.
to
I'm
construct
going to
this
have a
and
10
that.
minutes break. We can just.
Thank you.
Thank you.